just trying to be a father, raise a daughter and a son, be a lover to their mother, everything to everyone, up and at 'em bright and early, I'm all business in my suit. Yeah, I'm dressed up for success, from my head down to my boots. I don't do it for the money, there's bills that I can't pay. I don't do it for the glory, I just do it anyway. Providing for our futures, my responsibility. Yeah, I'm real good under pressure, being all that I can be. I can't call in sick on Mondays when the weekend's been too strong. I just work straight through the holidays, sometimes all night long. You can bet that I stand ready when the wolf growls at the door. Hey, I'm solid, hey, I'm steady, hey, I'm true down to the core. And I will always do my duty, no matter what the price. I've counted up the cost, I know the sacrifice. Oh, and I don't want to die for you, but if dying's asking me, I'll bear that cross with honor, 'cause freedom don't come free. I'm an American soldier, an American. Beside my brothers and my sisters, I will proudly take a stand. When liberty's in jeopardy, I will always do what's right. I'm out here on the front lines, sleeping peace tonight. American soldier, I'm an American soldier.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those
Check, 1 2 1 2.
of Talk Radio or its sponsor.
You're listening to Z-Talk Radio, the #1 choice for music, sports, news, and talk radio. So keep that dial locked to ztalkradio.com.
Okay, did I do that?
Check 1 2 1 2.
Alright, we'll go ahead and play that.
It is time to welcome the person that will guide you through the supernatural realm. Your host, Tim Roxbury.
And like Ed Becker said, I am your host, Tim Roxbury. And welcome back to another great Friday evening here on the Z Talk Radio Network. Well, I have a returning guest. She grew up in Indiana on 40-acre farmland and relocated to Massachusetts in her early 20s. When she's not writing, she's a seasoned paranormal investigator and an author. She spends her weekends in dark places with her friends. She's a hopeful romantic, a confessed Facebook addict, and she enjoys reading other people's novels. She hates pickles, spiders, negative people, but that's all another story altogether. Her name is Joni Mayhan. Joni, how are you doing this evening?
I'm great. Thanks for having me again.
You're welcome. I had a little glitch there on the Sam broadcaster. My finger got trigger happy there with the song there at the beginning, but it's something that a lot of people in this country take for granted, and that's our American soldiers. And there is a real threat over there, overseas, with these terrorists, creating havoc and beheading our journalists and everything. It's getting pretty scary again, and I hate to see what's to come, So anyhow, it's 90 degrees here in Western PA. It's very hot. I'm just trying to keep cool.
It's warm here in central Massachusetts as well, so I think it's warm everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've had a weird season this year. It's cold, it's hot, it's cold, it's hot, and I think summer's come back here when we're supposed to be having fall. So,
mm-hmm.
Joni, let's give a little bit of background about how you kind of got into the paranormal experience. I believe it's when you were a young child is when it all started for you. Is that correct?
That's correct. I always say when people ask me that question, it's not that I got into the paranormal, it's that the paranormal got into me.
Right.
I'm sensitive, which, there are a lot of people out there that are sensitive, and a lot of people don't realize they're sensitive, but they are, and it just means that I'm sensitive to spiritual energy, ghosts in particular, and I'm what they call clairaudient, so I hear a tone when a ghost comes into the room, and it's taken me most of my life to really figure it out, and through that I've been able to, to learn a little bit about the things that tend to follow me home. So I got into investigating to answer questions mostly for myself because I kept having strange occurrences happening in my house, a house that was never haunted before, and, things started happening, and it really kind of opened a door for me. In some cases it was very bad, which, last time I was talking about my book, The Soul Collector, where I had very negative entity attached to me and follow me home, and he was very, very difficult to get away and off of me. It took a lot of people's efforts. And, once I moved past that, I did back off the investigating a little bit because I was worried that I would just bring more really negative ones home. But as I started learning, ghosts are everywhere, and people don't really realize it. Being a clairaudient or sensitive, I'm able to detect them when I go places, and even people's homes. I'll walk in and I'll know they have something in their house. And a lot of times I just have to keep that to myself because if the ghost hasn't alerted himself to them, and they're not worried about it, the last thing I'm going to do is leave them, in a house that they didn't know was haunted with the knowledge that they're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of continued from there. I started writing about my experiences and discovered that people liked hearing what I was writing, so I just kept continuing. I do have some fiction books as well as the true paranormal books, but the book we're talking about tonight is very near and dear to my heart because it's been a part of my life since about 2010, more of an obsession than anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about being gifted. I didn't really realize it until I started, this paranormal journey that began in 2009. I've always felt that I've, felt spirit, I felt energy, I can hear voices and things like that. And it wasn't until I started, into this that, I realized that I'm not weird as people claim I am. I'm not strange. I I'm very different, so,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a reason for that. And,
Yeah.
a couple, a couple months ago, I was out up in Erie, and I talked to Tim Shaw for a little bit, and he's like, he said, why don't you admit that you can hear spirit? Why don't you admit that you could hear those voices? And I looked at him and I said, well, because of what people might think of me. And he's like, well, you have a gift. You can hear spirit. And he says you need to tune into it a little more. So it's kind of interesting.
I had the same experience. I went most of my life just either pretending it was not really happening to me, that, I was having ear ringing or tinnitus, or that it was just my imagination. And once I started really realizing that it wasn't my imagination, and I was getting validation from other senses, other mediums, and even my pets watching what I was hearing, that I realized that I had to adapt to this new life, and it's changed everything. It's really, it makes my entire life different than what it was before. And talking about it, I really kind of had to when I talked about the Soul Collector, because that's a big part of it, part of why he followed me to begin with. He saw me as a beacon. Sensitive, I don't know if we glow like bug lights, for a moth, mm-hmm. or, what they sense, but they see us clearer than they see regular non-sensitives. And mm-hmm. they just drift towards us. They're very drawn to us. So, once you open that up and really develop it, it's like a muscle. The more you flex it and exercise it, the stronger it gets. And that's exactly what has happened to me with my gift. I've become, much more closer to being a medium than a sensitive. I'm mm-hmm. starting to pick up vision, mind images and impressions now as well. So, and I'm worried too. I thought people are going to think I'm crazy, especially, all those old childhood friends on Facebook and family members. They're going to think I'm nuts. And I kind of got to the point where I said, you know what, this is how I am, and I just have to let it be known. And through writing that book, I had a lot of people come to me and say, you know what, I'm sensitive too, but I was afraid to admit it. And so they're kind of coming out of the closet with their abilities as well. And I went on to write another book after that called Ghostly Defenses, and it's kind of a sensitive guide to handling the gift that you're given. A lot of people don't know what to do, and that was a lot of the questions I kept getting. Well, how do I develop this, or how do I shut it off? How do I protect myself from things following me home? And so I took everything that I spent the last 3 years learning and put it down in that book. And it's a real quick, easy read, but it's only 99-cent download on Amazon.com. But it's a good kind of manual on getting started if you think that you're sensitive. And people have thanked me for writing it, and they share it with their friends. So just another mm-hmm. opportunity there.
Right. I'm sure, a lot of people who are gifted appreciate reading your book. I was talking to a friend of mine who was, real religious and believes in the Bible, believes in, when you die you go to heaven, there's a hell, blah, 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 and all that whole story. And he said that, psychics, you're not supposed to go to psychics, you're not supposed to get reading from psychics, believe in psychics, yada. But if it's part of who you are, if you are a gifted person, then how do they explain that? It's part of who you are.
Right.
You can't really ignore
it. And it's becoming more and more mainstream now with all the ghost hunting shows, and mm-hmm. it's in the media a lot more. So people that might not have talked about it 20 years ago are talking about it now, without laughing or, rolling their eyes. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a little bit easier now than it used to be. And I think, I talked with people that may not have believed years ago, like my parents would be a good example, and they both come around to understanding that just because we can't see it doesn't mean that it's not there.
Right.
It's like bacteria or germs were back, in the early 1900s. Nobody knew that, we should be worrying about germs and washing our hands and whatnot. And once we had the technology available so that we could see what was there, then people tended to believe it more. But it both could be the same thing. We just haven't worked out the technology to truly document their presence.
Mm-hmm. Now, your book, Bones in the Basement, what has been your experience in the Pierce haunted Victorian mansion?
I've had so many, it's not even funny. It started in, I want to say about 2005. The house was up for sale and it was empty. And I lived the next town, 2 towns over, and I used to come to Gardner a lot because that was the biggest city nearby, and that's where I grocery shopped and everything. And there was a Staples across town, and somebody said, "Oh, take Union Street. That's a great shortcut across Gardner that'll get you right to Staples." And I took it, and there it was. There was a house sitting right on the corner of Union and Broadway, at West Broadway. And I just stopped at the stop sign and looked at it. I knew, of course, what it was because it had been on Ghost Hunters already, and I recognized it. I said, "That's the haunted Victorian." And it was for sale that time. And I'm telling you, if I would have not owned a house and been deep in a mortgage, I would have probably scooped it up because it's a gorgeous house full of a lot of rich history, and it's just beautiful in the architecture. So time went on. I was scared of the house every time I drive by, just like everybody else in the area. And I really didn't have much communication with them until, I think it was towards the end of 2010, they started opening the house up for investigations. And I was one of the first teams there. I was with one of the first teams there. We went in. I didn't write myself into the book until the very end. I put a chapter in to talk about my personal experiences, but it was a little awkward for me to write my experiences, write myself as third person. So right. I kind of left myself out, but I did investigate there quite a number of times before I became friends with the owners. I think I just kept hanging around, and they started inviting me in. It wasn't quite that bad, but they're really wonderful people, really warm, generous people that give you hugs at the door and invite you in for dinner even if they don't barely know you. And it just kind of went from there. And we were talking about fundraising ideas because the house has definitely seen better days. It's built in 1875, and it has a series of renovations done over time, but a house that old needs more, and this one needs a new roof, and it's starting to affect everything below it. So I said, well, I could write a book. And we decided that, I would write the book and they would give me access to all their information and all the people that had investigated there, and I would donate half my profits back to the Victorian Fund so that they could hopefully do some renovations that are needed. So that's where it took off. It took me almost a year to write the book because it had a lot of interviews. A lot of people were involved in it, and as soon as I think I was finished, I'd have somebody else come up and say, "Oh, I had a really great experience there." And so there I go, and adding another interview. And it just kept going and going. And then I thought, well, I should put all the EVPs in here. And we have a couple of videos that people have caught some amazing captures there, stuff that should be on the nightly news, this evidence for ghosts. And so I started adding in EVPs. So when people buy the ebook, they're able to click the link and listen to the EVPs or watch the videos. So it's very interactive. It's not a book that you read in 3 days and then put down and forget. It's something you can keep going back to again and again. So it just kind of took off.
Mm-hmm. Were you able to validate a lot of your experiences with the history of the building?
It was interesting because we knew from prior experience, and people knew several of the people that haunted there. One was Mattie Cornwell, the nanny that came over from Nova Scotia when she was just a teen, and she cared for the Pierce's children. And they knew that she was there for a long time. They would get her on EVPs, and psychic mediums would come in and pick her up. She must have been very chatty because they would not only pick her up, they'd pick up her name without having talked to anybody before that. So they knew Mattie was there, and they saw her kind of as the protective spirit in the house. She kept the house from getting vandalized, which it was vacant for, over its lifetime, it was vacant for 23 years, off and on. So that's a lot of time for people to come in and carved their initials in doors and burned down doors for fire, and none of that ever happened. The woodwork is as pristine as it was back in 1875 when the house was built. Mm-hmm. So she was one of them, and another was Sari. He was a Finnish. He wasn't an immigrant. He was actually born in the United States, but he was a World War II veteran, and he had a head injury that caused him a lot of pain. And they say that he drank moonshine to help him get over the pain. And he was also a smoker. And one night, the fire department, this was in 1963, April 9th, the fire department was called because they were seeing flames through the windows. And they came in and found him burnt to death, or him burnt on the bed. And the bed was burnt, but the floors, ceilings, and walls were completely untouched. So at the time, they considered it the first case of spontaneous combustion. So it's big news in Gardner because nothing like that had ever happened before. But later we learned that it really wasn't spontaneous combustion. He probably spilled moonshine on himself and dropped a cigarette, and that was what caused his death. But he's also there, and he speaks pretty freely on audio. We've got a lot of captures of him. He's even shown himself to people. So there's two, and there's a little boy that's seen a lot, and he's seen by neighbors through the windows. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the research, I was able to confirm a lot of the ghosts that are there. Maddie Cornwell did exist, and through using a woman named Marion King, she did a lot of research for me. She was able to track down Maddie and learn that she actually died at age 25 from a hip inflammation. So she died very young. She just decided to stay at the house at that point. Sari was very easy to document. We actually found his grave in Gardner and went to visit it. And the little boy, he's one of the mysteries. There's no little boy that's ever been on record of dying in the house. Talking to psychic mediums, people feel that he might have been either a kid in the neighborhood that got hit by a car, or somebody that was a servant's child. Some people think that his death was not accidental. Mm-hmm. Other people think it was. So he's one of the mysteries we weren't able to solve, and there's a lot more. It's just there's at least a dozen ghosts in the house. Those are just the top four.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot of work researching a location like that, isn't it?
It is, but it was fun research because the house it's all-consuming, and so many people that I talked to through the interviews told me this again and again. They were just drawn to the house. The first time they went, they had to come back again. They wanted to come back, and I feel like the house selected people based on what it thought we could do for it, and I was definitely one of those people. I just could not stay away. I still can't stay away. I've been there twice this week and one time tomorrow, so it definitely pulls you in.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe that with your experiences, and I know what the answer is going to be, but do you believe that these locations, these homes, do you think they seek you out just like Spirit does?
I think so. I think they pull you in. Some of the people that are going to be calling in at 7 o'clock are people that have been pulled in and still continue to be pulled in, and they've actually been a part of the story. So it's good that they were pulled in because they may have, saved the day, in one person's case, and other people have. I can't wait. Mimi Watson's going to call in, and they've discovered some really fascinating things in the house that nobody found, just recently. So I won't give that away. I'll let her tell that story. But it draws us all in. We all have a reason, a purpose. We just set it up as a nonprofit so that we're doing active fundraising right now to help try to save this house. It probably has only 2 years left before it's past the point of no return. Oh, wow. It needs an entirely new roof, new eaves. Pigeons have completely destroyed the eaves. And there really is no finances to fix this. So we set up a GoFundMe account. We're making up T-shirts, going to be selling those, and then half my book profits are going towards it. And we're hoping to get people to come in to help that maybe know how to do roofing or know how to do some of the some of the work with eaves or people that have staging they can donate. And, a box of nails at this point is great. So we're doing an active fundraising. We set up a board of directors, and, of course, I'm on the board. And we've been having meetings trying to decide what we can do because we're all very passionate about this beautiful house. We don't want it to end up being collapsed, and destroyed and something else built on that site when it's been there for over 135 years.
Mm. The home, before you knew about it, it was vacant for a long time?
It's gone through periods. It was in the Pierce family for like 90 years. And then it went to another man named Jay Stemmerman, and he owned it for 35 years. But it was abandoned from 1981 to 2000. So that's a long stretch, 19 years that it just sat there with people. It was full of furniture and everything. And people, we talked to kids that came in and would play pool up in the pool table. And at one point, the owners did come in and sold all the furniture and the pool table and for auction. And the pool table went for, I think it was $350,000. It was worth more than the house. So, at that point, it became empty. And then Mark Lowe and Suzanne Casanova bought it in 2000, and they did extensive renovations. I guess the entire second floor in the master bedroom was caved in. The porches were destroyed, and they did a lot of work, and they started painting it. They got about halfway up, and then they ended up getting a divorce, so they moved out of the house. And Edwin and Lillian, then it sat vacant for another 2 years, and then Edwin and Lillian bought it in 2008. So, and now it's vacant again. It's just sitting there. I mean, we go check it all the time just to make sure it's okay, but nobody's living there right now.
It's kind of strange that, it takes ownership, and then, the people that end up moving out of the house after a short period of time. You think maybe some of the activities causing them to do that or go through so many owners?
I can't tell you about the Pierces or Jay Stemmerman, but I can tell you Mark Foe knew it was haunted when he was there. He had investigations in the house as well, and he knew about quite a few of the ghosts. But they were never afraid. They never had anything really bad happen, and I think some of it might have been to the fact that they were constantly working on renovating the house. So I think there was some kind of calming effect to them that the ghost there said, don't mess with these people. They're fixing the house. And, Lillian and Edwin moved in, and they didn't do as many repairs. They didn't have the money. They did a lot of things that people don't see, they spent like $6,000 trying to fix the chimneys, only to discover that afterwards that they still couldn't use them because the guy used some kind of wrong materials or something. So the house is still unheated at this point. But yeah, I think that the ghosts there, I think they've gotten stirred up a lot too in the recent years. They have a lot of investigations at that house, and as you know, not all investigators are alike. Some like to come in and do provoking, and regardless of the fact that when they leave, somebody has to sleep there that night, so they get them all stirred up. I think some circles were created and people were using Ouija boards improperly, and there are 3 portals in the house where ghosts are able to come and go at will. So it's just gotten more haunted over time instead of less haunted, and the ghosts are very agitated.
Yeah, I think I would be too if it was my house or the house I passed away in. I think I would get pretty agitated too, especially if someone came into my house and started provoking and calling me names. I don't think I'd like that too well.
Oh no, I push and scratch too. I've always said that, and if when they were open to investigations, I was there sometimes to oversee some of the events, and I made sure that nobody did that because. It's like, how would you like it if somebody walked in your house, put their finger in your chest and said, talk to me, and started calling you names? You'd be mad. You'd throw them out of your house. And, that's basically what they're trying to do. It's like, who do you think you are coming into my house and talking to me that way? So, I'm always very respectful when I go in there. I don't poke and prod it and then, can you make the door rattle or, can you turn on a light? I just sometimes I'll have my recorder on and I'll run it and I'll just say, if there's anything you want to tell me, anything you need, tell me on my recorder and we'll make sure it's done. I said, consider us servants to this house. We're here to take care of you. And nothing bad has ever happened to me. I've slept there several times with nothing more than being poked a few times to get the covers tugged and stuff. But they've never done anything scary to me, and I feel completely comfortable in the house.
Hmm. I've had some experiences where, I would just set up a recorder in a room and just walk away for a couple hours, and just tell them if there's anything they want to say, feel free to say it. We'll get your message and we'll pass it on to whoever needs to hear it. And a lot of times there's voices or there's a message on those recorders. So, these guys and these people that go in and provoke, it's just easier just to, leave a voice recorder in a room and just walk away from it and say, hey, I'm here if you need me, and I'm recording this if you want to say something. I think you get a better response that way.
Oh, absolutely. And they're willing to talk. They'll, they talk to, it's really primarily three people that go in there most of the time, and one is Mary Luoma, who's the caretaker, and Tina Obi, she helps Marion with caretaking, and they're both on the board of directors. We have 7 people on our board of directors, but when we're there and we're running recorders, we often get a lot more responses. They know our names. They've said our names. And I put it in the book as a link. There's 2 times there that I've gotten them to say my name. One of them, it was an EVP. The other was across the spirit box. I have an SP7 spirit box, and very, very clearly I said, do you know who I am? And 2 different voices came through within 10 seconds of each other, and one was a female, and she said, Joni, and then a male said, Joni. So it was clear as day. It was no denying that was my name. It wasn't a stray radio signal or, some kind of sound that was within the house. It was clearly my name said twice. So they know who we are. They know what we're doing. We talk to them all the time. We treat them almost like they're invisible. Well, like they are invisible people, which to me that's what they are.
Mm-hmm. I think it's very comforting for them to have that communication when, the house is laid dormant for so long. I think they're just happy to have somebody, calmly talk to them and communicate with them.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine. In some ways, we really don't know what goes on, in that realm. There's, it could be any number of things. We know that some of them are intelligent and aware of what we're doing because they communicate and respond and back to questions, or they'll make a comment on something we're doing. So, they're watching us and they see what's going on. But in some senses, I think that there may be some there that, I don't want to call them residual because I think that they are actual ghosts there, but they're almost living in their own world. Like, to them, they see the house as it was in 1910. And they're just going about their day. And we come in their room, and it disturbs them, and they get upset. And those the ones that I think lash out. They're like almost like that movie, The Others. They don't really realize that they're ghosts. They kind of probably see us as intruders more than anything. So there's a lot of different theories.
Right. Have you ever had any experiences as far as seeing ghosts or seeing spirits walk through walls or seeing full body apparitions inside the home?
It's funny. Every time I'm there, I see something. We were there the other day talking about renovations, and I was dropping off books, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw something dark by the doorway, and I'm, believe it or not, a big skeptic, so I'm always going to try to disprove things before I consider it paranormal. So I started watching the doorway to see if it was traffic going by on the street causing reflections or something, and nothing happened. I was watching for a while, and then as soon as I looked back away again, I saw that dark shadow go by, and somebody else said, "Oh my gosh, did you see that?" And it was like, yeah. So, that's constant. We see that all the time. So lots of people have seen full-bodied apparitions there. I have not. And I keep telling them, I say, all the time I've been here, I feel like I'm gypped, But I haven't yet seen anything. But I have seen full-bodied apparitions before elsewhere, so I know what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. I know myself. I haven't physically seen them, but I've captured full body operations on film as I was doing EVP sessions in a certain area of a location. So that's it's pretty exciting when you get something like that. And a lot of times you don't even realize it, and someone else looks at the picture and sees like there's a guy standing there. I'm like, because I had that happen to me. Well, with a photo I took at Flindration Tunnel, and my neighbor. I've had this picture probably about 2 or 3 years, and my neighbor looked at it because there's a guy standing there. Were you guys in there? I'm like, no, there was nobody in there at the time I snapped that picture. So it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, definitely. The first time I saw a full-bodied apparition was when I used to work for Petco, and I started off as assistant manager, and then I moved to manager. And I had just moved to the store, and people told me before I got there, they said, this building's haunted. And at the time, I believed in ghosts. Obviously, I was a sensitive, but I really hadn't tapped into those abilities yet. I was still in that denying stage. And we were there early. There's only 2 of us. And I was walking down one of the aisles heading towards the back room. And I saw this older man dressed in older clothing, like a jacket and like a pea cap, was looking at something on the end cap. But he was like a black and white photo. He was all in shades of gray. And I passed a row of books, and so I lost track of them for a couple seconds. Then I got past him. There was nobody there. Doors are locked. I searched the entire building. There was nobody there. And over time, we kept having things happen. Things would disappear and reappear in other places. And, I'm sure the building's still haunted. I don't know if they know it now, but we knew it when we were there.
It's interesting. The title of your book is Bones in the Basement. How did you come up with that title?
Well, because I think it really signifies, it's symbolic of what goes on in the house. It does tell a story. There's a story about bones in the basement, but it's also symbolic of things being hidden in the house. There's a lot of stories that we haven't gotten to the bottom of yet. The bones in the basement story, this came towards the last year that they were in the house, and Lillian was overtaken by something. There was an entity in the house that kept trying to overtake Lillian, and it was successful at least twice. And the first time, I tell the story from Edwin's point of view. The book is written like a fiction book, so it's suspenseful. I try to write it so that it keeps your attention. It's not like a documentary kind of book. I tell the story as it goes along. So I tell it from Edwin's point of view. Was he woke up and Lillian was in the bedroom and she was humming. It was almost like a nursery song or something. And he said, if you know Lillian, Lillian doesn't hum in the morning. And she would never hum a nursery rhyme. He said she's has her routines and she sticks to them. In the morning, she gets up, she goes down, she turns the heater on in the bathroom because it took about a half an hour before it even got warm enough that you could go in there to shower. And then she'd go down, fix coffee, have a cigarette, and then she'd come up, take her shower, get dressed. And she apparently just skipped all that and got ready and was dressed in nice clothing like she was going out somewhere. And he said, where are you going? And she just, like she didn't hear him, she just kept going. And he worked from home, so he thought she had left, that she got in her car and went out to run errands or something. And so he went up to work. He had an office on the second floor, and very busy. He works for an insurance company, so he's on the phone all day long, phone calls and reports and stuff. So he was very busy, but he kept thinking, she should be home by now. And he looked out the window, and her car's still in the driveway, and he thought, well, that's weird. And, he worked for a little bit longer. Then he went down. He went to actually look for her. He's like, this is too weird. I haven't seen her. I haven't heard her. Where is she? And so he searched, went up to the third floor and looked around for her. She had an office up there. She wasn't up there. Looked around the second floor. She wasn't there. Looked around the first floor. She wasn't there. And, this is cold time. So it's, she's not going to be outside. I think it was like November, December. And so he thought, well, maybe she's in the basement. She loved hanging out in the basement. She was always down there doing something in the basement. So he goes down. As he's going down the stairs, he hears digging. And as he gets down to the bottom, he can see she's in one of the rooms that was used as a summer's kitchen back when the house was in Victorian times. They would cook in the basement so they wouldn't heat up the house. And they had a dumbwaiter that would carry the food up to the first floor. So there's also in that summer's kitchen was an old kiln on the floor. And it really kind of looks like, the best way to describe it, it looks like a chimney on the floor. It sticks up about 3 feet from the floor. And when they bought the house, it was filled to the top with ashes. So they must have used it, back in the old days to burn stuff or maybe to cook over. And she was digging. She had a little shovel, and she was digging. Dust is soot is flying. She's covered in soot, and she's wearing good clothes, which wouldn't be something she normally do. And he said, "Will, what are you doing?" And she just looked at him, and she said, "I don't know what I'm doing." And then she went back to digging. Like, it was almost like she wasn't there, it wasn't her. And he said, "Why don't you come upstairs?" And she snapped at him and said, "Just leave me alone." And he kind of walked away like, all right, and it wasn't much longer that she came up, and she was kind of snapped out of her fugue, or whatever you want to call it. And she said, "Look what I found, hon. I found bones, and I found a hip bone." And he's like, "How do you know that's a hip bone?" And she said, "I don't know, I just do." And she showed it to him, and they didn't know what hip bones looked like. They tried to look it up on the internet. It looked like a hip bone. They took some pictures of it, and he had a doctor's appointment the next day, so he brought it into his doctor, and he said it wasn't his specialty, but it did look like maybe a child's hip bone to him. So he was going to talk to one of his friends who was an orthopedic surgeon to see if he knew what it was, if it was a hip bone. And so he took the picture. And he came back a few days later and said, it looks like part of a child's hip bone to him, but he couldn't be sure. So time went on, and Lillian was more and more concerned about it. She just was convinced that it was the little boy that they'd seen in the house, that it was his bone, and that he took her down there to show her so that she could share a story. And she kept saying, "What does this mean? What does this mean? Why did you send me down to find this bone? And what am I supposed to do now?" And so she took the next step, and she went down to the police department and said, "I found a bone in my basement, and can you come down?" And the guy that they sent down was, kind of stone-faced, and he wasn't very friendly. He took some pictures and took off with the bone, and they said, "Well, what will happen?" And he said, "Well, we'll send it off for analysis. If it's human, then we'll open a case." And a long time went by. They didn't hear anything back, and they had to call them, and they were just brushed off. They said, "Oh, it wasn't human." And so they never got the bone back, and they never, learned what it really was. Whether it was human or not human, I don't think is really the point. I think the point is that they were trying to tell them that there's a story that needs to be told, and they were trying to get Lillian to disclose it, and she tried, but, I tried to research, but it's a story that some of them I want told, but others don't, so it's still a mystery. Are you there?
All right, I think we're back. Joni, you with us?
Yes, I am.
All right. I don't know what happened, but when you started talking about the bones in the basement, my mic had issues, so I'm not sure what happened there. But
the ghost didn't want me to tell that story, I guess.
I guess not. So, do you remember where you left off about that?
Oh, I told the whole story. I don't know how much you heard.
I heard about the stove and they would burn wood in there to keep warm when they weren't cooking down there.
Mhm. Okay. So she went down and was digging in the kiln, and I told it so well the first time too. I don't know if I can duplicate that. Edwin was working and upstairs, and he didn't know where she was. And he came to look for her, and he found her in the basement, hunched over that kiln, just digging up a storm. She was all dressed up, and it made no sense. And he said, "What are you doing?" And she kind of looked at him, but she wasn't really there. She said, I don't know what I'm doing." And he said, "Well, why don't you come upstairs?" And she just snapped at it and said, "Leave me alone." And so, he left her alone, and she died for a little bit longer, and then she came up, and she said, "Hon, look what I found." And she was completely back to herself. She said, "I found bones in the basement." And she showed him, she said, "It's a hip bone." And she showed it to him, and he said, "How do you know it's a hip bone?" She said, "I don't know, I just know that it is." Or a pelvic bone, sorry, I said hip bone. And so she shows him the bone, and they look it up on the internet. It kind of looked like a pelvic bone, but they weren't completely sure. So he had a doctor's appointment the next day, so he brought the bone in, and he said, "What do you think?" And his doctor said, "Well, it looks like a child's pelvic bone. I don't know." But he said he had a friend who was an orthopedic surgeon that he would bring a picture of it to and ask him and see what he thought. And a few days later, he got back to him. He said, he for all practical purposes, that's what it looks like. It's hard to tell without seeing the actual bone. So it really kind of set Lillian off, though. She felt like they brought her down in that basement to show her something, and they wanted to tell her something, and she couldn't figure out what to do with it. She said, "What does this mean? What am I supposed to do with this?" And she just wasn't getting any answers. And so she brought it to the police department, and they came out and they looked around, and they took the bone, and they said, "We'll let you know what it is." And a couple weeks went by, and they hadn't heard back from him or anything, and so they finally called down, and they said, "Oh, don't worry about it, it's not human." And so they were just kind of left. They didn't have the bone anymore, so they couldn't do private analysis, and they were told it wasn't human. But at that point, I don't think it really mattered, because I think it was symbolic. I think that whether it was human or not, she was sent down there to try to uncover some kind of mystery. Now, it's interesting because since that point, they had a psychic medium in the house to see if the house could be cleansed, and I got to be the one that walked around with her. And this was actually recent, and because they wanted to try to, release some of the souls that are there if they could. And the house is so incredibly haunted, people can't live there, and they don't, they can't just leave the house empty. So as she's walking around, she would not even go in the basement. She said, "I am not going down there." She said, "There's something down there that I don't like." And she said, I would bet my life on it that there's at least 2 bodies buried in that basement." She was telling me where in the basement she saw those bodies buried. She said somebody was buried down there, and it was because their death was covered up. And she said it happened several times. She said a lot of bad things happen in that basement. So, until they actually, pull the floor up and start digging, they're not going to know for certain. But I think it's symbolic of everything that goes on in that house. It's like some of the ghosts want their story told, and others don't.
That's weird that, the psychic said that about the bones, and then you're not hearing back from the police department in so long, and then they come back and say it's not human. It's almost like they know something too, and they don't want to. It was
very strange. Yeah, the whole thing was very strange. I'm not going to say that they were covering up that it was real bones, but none of it was right. It just was all very, very strange. Not like, we've since learned that, there's more of a procedure and a process that would happen, and it didn't seem like none of that happened. So I don't know. It's very strange.
Were you able to maybe contact a forensics person if you do find more bones in the basement?
Oh yeah, if they found anything else, certainly they would. They have the pictures still of the bones, and I did put those in the book, but they don't have the actual bones. But yeah, and the bones, interestingly enough, there were layers, and she was finding newspapers from 1910 and scraps of different debris that was dated, 1900s, and she found a garter belt and other bone fragments, and then the hip bone was way below all those, so it happened, well before 1910 because there's the newspaper layers above it, so it's just kind of interesting. So whatever happened a very long time ago.
Mm-hmm. Joni, it's about 5 to 7. I don't know if we have some callers. I'm hoping we have some callers. Some of the people that were investigators and maybe who have had their own personal experiences in the mansion. I'm going to go ahead and take a little break here, and we'll see if we can get someone to call in.
Sounds good.
All right. You've been listening to the Supernatural Realm on the Z Talk Radio Network. We'll be right back right after this.
Why do bad things happen to good people? I don't know, but they do. And why is this world full of so much evil
I figured this song fit.
and so much pain? I wish I knew. When I see God, I'm gonna ask Him. But I don't know when that'll be. But I'm one day closer to one day knowing all the answers I've been searching for. My time on earth is getting shorter, and my list of questions keeps on growing. But I'm one day closer to one day knowing. Why is life down here such a struggle? Trouble's all I've ever known. And when I die, will I go to heaven? And will it be like going home? Will my lost loved ones be there waiting? There's no way to know right now, but I'm one day closer to one day knowing all the answers I've been searching for. My time on earth is getting shorter, and my list of questions keeps on growing. But I'm one day closer to one day knowing how it feels to stand among the angels, and why sometimes they don't intervene. Yeah, I'm one day closer to one day knowing all the answers I've been searching for. My time on earth is getting shorter, and my list of questions keeps on growing. But I'm one day closer to one day knowing.
That was Jeff Bates, One Day Closer. You know, I think that pretty much sums it up to why, people like us, Joni, get involved with the paranormal. I think we're searching for answers. We're trying to figure out what comes next, what life comes next, what's life after this going to be like. I think we're always searching for answers, and one day we will know what those answers are.
Right. No, that's a very good point. I think we all want to know what happens to us after we die. I know, for one, I see that white light, I'm diving for it. So, I don't want to be an earthbound ghost.
Exactly.
That's much fun.
Right. Anybody that wouldn't die for that white light is pretty dumb in my opinion. But because you gotta, why, you want, why, who would want to stay here?
I think there's a lot of reasons behind that. One of my theories is that people that commit suicide might be in that very human emotion where they're not thinking about what happens, and they do themselves in, and then they see the white light and they go, oh crap, because everything that religion teaches us, or a lot of religions teach us, is that if you commit suicide, you go to hell. So they might pause and hesitate, to cross over and end up, being earthbound, or maybe they're not allowed to be earthbound. Maybe this is purgatory. You hear people talk about it in many religions that, it's like hell on earth, and they're forced to stay here until their natural life would have ended. But I think that does account for a lot of the hauntings and sudden deaths. People don't understand, or they don't want to go. They have family here they want to watch over. They don't want to leave their house, or they have unfinished business, or maybe they were murdered and they can't leave until somebody finds out who killed them. And I think there's a host of reasons. I have a hard time going to hotels because of that. I try to stay at a hotel, and being a sensitive, they zoom right in on me. And I think a lot of them are suicides. My theory is that if somebody's going to kill themselves and they didn't want their family to find them, what better place to go than to a hotel where the maid's going to find them instead of maybe their daughter or wife or husband. And I get bombarded every time I go to a hotel, even nice ones. There's somebody there that finds me. So hospitals are very haunted locations. Churches are very haunted. It's like people are always looking for a haunted place to go investigate, and the ghosts are right around you. They're all around all of us almost all the time. And the places that you would not think about being haunted are the most haunted.
Joni, when you go to like Walmart or restaurants, do you see spirit around other people and around living people who may not realize
I don't normally see them. I did one time. It was sort of funny you said Walmart, because I was coming out of Walmart one day and I looked up and I saw somebody with an orange shirt on at one of the checkout counters. This is an older Walmart, and it was like kind of by itself and close to the door. And I looked down because I was going to trip over something. I looked back up and that person was gone, and there was nobody, within 30 feet of that register. So I looked around behind it as I walked by, and I thought, I think I just saw a ghost. And I wonder how many other people see things like this and don't think about it. They think, oh, I must have just missed it. Maybe, or I saw something. Maybe it was my imagination. And, they see things and they don't realize. So who knows?
Walmart's a pretty scary place with...
Without being haunted.
Without being haunted, yeah. Just the people themselves that go in there.
But as for your question about restaurants and things, being clairaudient, I hear and I feel. So I'm also clairsentient. So I can feel when the energy approaches, and it's accompanied by a tone that gets louder as they get closer and softer as they go further away. And each one has a different sound. Sometimes I think I might be hearing their vibration. I'm not sure. It's something I hear what the sound a ghost makes, and that's how I know they're there. And they will come up to the table. And sometimes it's quite awkward because, if you're with people that aren't really paranormally inclined, they're going to think you're crazy if all of a sudden you're, telling something to go away, leave me alone. So it gets entertaining.
Have you ever had a spirit want you to communicate with someone they may be around and let them know that they're there, or let them know, want to know something about them?
Yeah, I don't always get, I'm just starting, within the last year, starting to get clearer impressions, so sometimes I will get that. I think one of our most interesting investigations, we were called to a business that the owner was it was haunted, and he was very terrified at going to work. And it turns out through our investigation, we were able to determine that the place was actually haunted by the former bar manager, and he was somebody that was very close to the manager or the owner, and he was just trying to let him know he was there. So once we told him that, he was able to come in and have a conversation every day. He'd say, hey, Norm, I'm here. Yeah, I know you're here. You don't need to keep trying to scare me to get my attention. And the haunting pretty much disappeared after that.
Well, it's interesting. It's almost like they wanted you to be there.
No, yeah, we got definitely pulled in. I'm still friends with the person that pulled me in, so she's involved with the renovations on the Victorian, so everything comes around for a reason.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I agree. If anybody wants to call in, the number is 724-602-2826. If anybody has had experience in the Victorian mansion, or if anybody has a question for Joni or myself, feel free to call in. The number is 724-602-2826. We'll get you through and get your questions answered as best we can. Joni, what has been one of your most frightening experiences investigating the paranormal or investigating a certain location?
I've had quite a few. I wouldn't say most of them are not terrifying. I don't really get scared. I might be initially startled, but I wanted to post this on Facebook if I can get somebody to call in right now.
Okay.
But anyways, yeah, I just posted it, so hopefully we'll get some people to call in. But, I mean, when I went through the Soul Collector, that was terrifying. That really was scary because there was somebody really creepy haunting me. He was hanging over my shoulder 24/7, and I was getting very clear impressions of him, and they weren't nice. And, yeah, that was the most scary thing. But, outside of that, I'd say it's a place that we're actually going back to on the 20th is Rolling Hills Asylum in West Bethany, New York. And I was really experimenting. I've been there twice already, and we're going back again with a group on the 20th. And I was experimenting with my abilities, and I've learned that if I really focus in on a tone, like I'll hear different tones swirling in and out of each other. Like one will come closer while the other one goes further away. It's almost like watching a tennis match. I can tell you where they are in the room by where the tone is the loudest. And but I found that if I really focus in on one tone, it's almost like it calls it in. So we weren't getting a whole lot of activity that night. It was really quiet. And so I started really focusing on one of the tones and trying to pull it in. And we were in a dark, long hallway. I think they call it Shadow Hallway, where they're often seeing shadows. And all of a sudden I see something that looks like a snaky mist. It was, about as around as maybe a cantaloupe, but it was long like a snake, and it was swirling in and out, and it came and it shot right through the middle of me. And I felt it go inside of me. It was like my body filled up with something, like I took a deep breath, but I didn't take a deep breath, and it was cold. And then it went out the back of me again. And that did freak me out just a little bit because I got more than what I asked for in that case. So I'm careful now when I'm somewhere like that or somewhere I don't know what the ghosts are. I'm not going to call them in close like that again.
Mm-hmm. What do you do to protect yourself, Joni? I know people say prayers or somewhere Catholic blessed medals or whatever.
And I cover that in my book, Ghostly Defenses. But I do a number of things, and something's going to work differently or better for other people. I always carry protection stones in my pockets. I wear hematite, which is very grounding, which helps me stay rooted. Black tourmaline is one of my favorites. I have a snowflake obsidian, and it helps me to kind of ward off the negative energy. I used to wear a St. Benedict's medal all the time until it literally fell off. It was so worn. And then after that, I wore a crucifix for a while. And I kind of learned that protection is really inside you and what you do. And so I learned how to shield and to be able to use my own body's energy to protect myself from anything latching on to me. Every once in a while, one does get through, though, even despite what I do. I'm a beacon. They follow me. They see me as somebody that can help them. And the real persistent ones are going to find a way to follow me no matter what I do. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, usually I can hear them. I'll be leaving a location. I can hear them in the car with me. And so I'll pull in my guides. And, everybody has a spirit guide, and mine know what to do. They've been through the routine so many times. And I'll say out loud, okay, my guides and guardians, please come in and get this entity out of my car. I do not want it with me. And I'll hear a tone that's completely different. It's always a very high-pitched, pure, like a bell, swoop in. And most times I'll hear, it's almost like a spiritual warfare going on in my car. I can hear the tones swirling in and out of each other. I can all but see it. And, describing that on the radio to 1,000 people is probably not great because more and more people are going to think I'm crazy now than they did before. But I can tell you that by the time I get home, I'm not hearing that sound anymore. I don't hear any sounds, and I go home and I'm by myself, and I don't bring a ghost home. So I have to say that something's effective.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have several very talented psychic mediums that work remotely. That if I do get something that still comes through all that my guides can't handle, they'll come in. Actually, one of them's going to call in shortly. Michael Robichaud. He's
awesome.
He's come in and helped me many times.
Mm-hmm. Do you think we as gifted individuals, do you think we're a target for spirit and spirit communication?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think, if you were in a foreign country walking around and you saw somebody that, looked American, you'd probably go up and try to talk to them. And, especially if you were in a place where you really needed help and you were in dire situation. And, yeah, I think that's the same thing with the ghosts. They see us and we must glow, or we must be we stand out to them as somebody that knows they're there. Mm-hmm. And they're going to try to get help or get a message crossed, or maybe they just enjoy hanging out with people that know they're there. So, and some of them aren't good, and I'm saying they're all, somebody's grandma that passed away and wants to tell them where the will's hidden. Some of them just like picking on people. They're like bullies in life and bullies in death. So there's just a full range of them, just like there's a full range of people.
Yeah, I've heard that one time. A lot of people actually told me that they believe that, the way a person is in life is the way they're going to be in death. So
mm-hmm.
I've heard that a lot.
It's scary, huh?
Some people that's pretty frightening to have that. I know my father's like, when he passes away, I'm gonna have to do all kind of cleansings. Hello, you're with Joni Mayhan on the Supernatural Realm.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. Hi. My name is Mimi. I'm calling in about the show.
Oh, hello.
Hi, Mimi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Thank you for calling. Mimi she's had a lot of really fascinating experiences in the house. She's friends with Edwin and Lillian. Her and her husband come in, and they've recently been doing some amazing renovations on the house. They just took the front and back doors and sanded them down and stained them and polished them and brought them back to the way they looked, a century ago. So they've been doing a lot of really nice things in the house. But Mimi's also a medium, and she's had some really incredible experiences.
Mm-hmm. Mimi, why don't you tell us some about those experiences you've had in the home?
Oh, okay. Last year we did an investigation, had some unusual experiences happen to us. When we were there last year, we had a lot of experiences we were up in the billiard room on the third floor and had asked S.K. Pierce, we are ready to play some pool. Would you like to play some pool? So on our EVP, we captured as clear as day, I don't think so. What is more like a whisper, I don't think so. So that was like, oh my goodness. So we picked up a lot, over the years inside the house, and we made our way down to the red room on the second floor where we heard a chair fall outside of the room, but there was nobody there. And we had smelled some lady's perfume just at the top of the landing right outside of the red room, which was it actually smelled really good. I wish I had some. But we had some experiences where we were poked at in a gentle way. Fans shutting off, rattling of doorknobs. Ken was sitting downstairs and he heard somebody walking across the third floor, and they were starting to come down the stairs, and then it stopped. So, that was a little hair raiser.
Mm-hmm.
We also had the experience of listening to little footsteps running across the third floor, and one of the EVPs we caught was a little boy saying, "You won't catch me." So
wow.
That was really cool. We made a CD for Lillian and Edwin to hear. I don't know if they've listened to it yet, of all the stuff that we picked up over there. Ken had seen an apparition, and it was a real tall one. And we've seen many shadow people walking the halls and on the stairs, and kind of makes you take a second look.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Ken's the only one that actually feels comfortable in the cellar. I know I'm not. I need somebody to hold my hand. I just don't like the energy down there. You never know what you're going to meet, but it doesn't faze him at all.
Mm-hmm.
So he can have the cellar. But I mean, there's so much to talk about. So many different experiences, and every time we would go, we'd find something new and hear something different, and there's just too much to tell you.
Do you think
I'd have to play it all for you.
Do you think there's something negative or something evil in the basement?
Ken doesn't seem to think so. I just don't like the energy that's down there. I'm sure if there was a lot more lighting, it wouldn't bother me as much.
Mm-hmm.
But we introduce ourselves when we go down there. We tell them who we are, set up a communication with them, and Ken will go in, grab the lawnmower, go out. He'll go in there, turn the light on in the cellar, and he comes up like there's no tomorrow. Like nothing happened. Me, I won't even go down the first step. So I need like I said, I need him to hold my hand when I go down the stairs.
Yeah, a lot of people have had negative experiences down there in that basement. There's definitely a dark energy. And I agree. I don't think it's evil. My feeling is I think it's Edward, the youngest son that ended up having to turn the house over to outside of the family, and he ended up living in the basement until he died when he was like 84, and he lived in the basement and, kind of in shame. So I think it's Edward, but, that's up to discussion.
Do you think he's upset about? Do you think he's upset about what happened to the house?
Oh, I'm sure he is.
I'm sure he is, and I think he's just a grumpy old man. That's just the energy I feel. He's just grumpy, and he doesn't want anybody in his space. Just leave me the hell alone. And if you don't, he surrounds you with a black mist. And I've had this happen many times there, to the point where you can't see lights on the other side of the room, or if somebody has equipment, or you can see a little red light. It just blocks it out, and you get this overwhelming feeling that you need to get out of there now.
Mm-hmm.
And he's done that so many times. When I was interviewing people for the book, I kept getting that same story, and I'm like, wow, so it wasn't my imagination.
Mm-hmm. I've had clients tell me, different investigations I've done, they've said, I see a black shadow, I see black mist, and I tell them, I said, just because you see black mist doesn't necessarily mean it's evil. It could just be, an angry person or an angry spirit who had passed on before.
Right.
It's not necessarily evil.
Right. I call them shadow people.
Right.
I mean, we have one at our house, but not like they have over there. And Joni, by the way, I love your book.
Thank you. Thank you. And I just wish I would have had an interview with you guys in it. I just had gotten to a point where I had so many, I'd stopped. The book was going to be 1,000 pages long if I didn't, But maybe give me a part 2. Things are happening still, so there could be a part 2 coming up sometime down the future.
Oh, yeah,
Tell
thank
about
you.
finding how Kim found that article up under the cistern. That was really cool.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe about the doors being a part of the reason. I think that's fascinating.
Well, we were doing some repairs. Ken's been working on the doors, and for some reason we couldn't find room number 1. There was no room number 1. It went 523, 46, which we can't find wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. When we drew lines on the second floor, it turned out to be a K. And then we did another, without room number 1, it turned out to be an S, the way that everything shaped up on upstairs. We were using the pendulum, and the pendulum had asked us to go to the 3rd floor. So it took us into the cistern room, and Ken's using his pendulum for a yes and no, maybe, and it guided us over to the cistern. So he's on his hands and knees underneath, and he's getting pretty dirty, which is kind of funny. And he found this. I don't know how old it was, but it was maybe about 100 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a little pan that they would use for, I don't know, washing. And it's like, oh my goodness. So, I mean, it's a beautiful pan. We had taken some pictures of it and posted it. And, but number one wasn't down there. So we got up again, and his pendulum guided him to some old doors that were up against the wall. And when we pulled them out, there was a number one. Come to find out, the number one is a closet that Lillian had used, and when we put those all together with the numbers, it was the infinity symbol.
Oh, wow.
And then when we went, the third floor, we couldn't figure out the numbers on there because it went from 7, 8, number 9 went across one way, 10. So in other words, since you don't have the visual, when we connected the dots, it was a star that went right back down to the stairs because there's only one set of stairs up to the third floor. So you had to get back out. So there's your symbol of the star.
Wow, that's crazy. Huh. So you don't think it was
interesting because there were a lot of Masons involved with that house. So there's a lot of symbolism hidden around the house. So it does not surprise me that if you follow, it's like following a dot to dot. You follow 1 to 2 to 3, and you make a shape, and that's how they came up with the infinity symbol and the star. So it makes me wonder if somebody did that on purpose, trying to maybe pass along a message.
Yeah, I mean the female, I don't know if they're called Masons. They're called Eastern Stars, and so people that I know had mentioned that is a symbol of the Masons. But they can't go into any more detail because it's very secretive. But it makes you want to find out more.
Definitely.
You don't think that 5-pointed star could mean maybe a Wiccan belief or something like that as well?
No, because it was more Masons, and no, I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, it could be, but I don't think that the Masons would have done symbols of Wiccan.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, this is from when the house was a boarding house.
Oh.
It was a boarding house for like 26 years. So.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But I mean, I like the energy. I mean, the house just keeps drawing you back and back. You leave and you want to go back. You leave and you want to go back. So it's just like a rotation. I come home, I'm like, I want to go to the mansion.
Mm-hmm. Mimi, do you believe that these buildings call you out or search you out?
I guess there's a reason why, all of a sudden you go and then you just want to keep going back. I mean, it does have that attraction.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a beautiful Victorian, and we love Victorians anyways, so if we see them, we always want to stop and take pictures.
Mm-hmm.
But this one has a different feel to it. It's not just the house, it's what's inside of it, I think. It pulls a lot of people in. Like it's selecting us for certain roles. That's the way I feel.
Yeah, I think that since we've gone there so many times in the past, that the spirits are used to us, and there are many different ways that they want to communicate with us as we want to communicate with them.
Mm-hmm. We have another caller from the 978 area code. Go ahead, caller, with your question or comment.
Hi, I hope you're talking to me.
Yes, I am.
Hi, how are you? As usual, I'm late. I'm 25 minutes late from when Joni asked me to call.
It's fine. This is Bill Wallace calling in. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Joan. I'm sorry I'm late.
Oh, you're okay. No, you're fine. We were talking to Mimi. She's still on the line, too, so we can all have a group chat. But Bill, if you read the book, Bill, I see him as the protector of the house. He's really come in at really key moments and helped Edwin and Lillian understand what's going on, give them warnings and guidance. And his involvement in the house goes back to the previous owner. So Bill's another one of us that's been called into the house. So you can tell your stories if you want, Bill.
Well, hi. How are you, everybody?
Hello, Bill.
I was drawn to the house, as just about everybody is who's involved with it. And the previous owner, Mark, and I had a friendly relationship. The house called to me. Maddie called me, and Protector of the house. No, thank you, Jody, but I don't deserve those types of titles. I do know that the house is in extremis right now, and my involvement with Joni and the Bones in the Basement story, that goes back a decade about, and it's an incredible building. The paranormal aspect of the building aside, it's a cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
It happens to be a 3-story tall cabinet built by a man who owned a furniture making company. So how cool is that?
That's really neat.
There are 500-pound doors, or 350-pound doors. Sorry, I don't want to exaggerate. They're 350-pound doors that were hung 130 years ago that you can still move with your finger.
Oh, that's awesome. What year was the house built?
Joni, the exact date?
1875.
Wow.
1875. So there you go. So 125 years ago, roughly, the doors were hung, and other than dusting and obviously refurbishing from people who've moved in like that, nobody's ever taken the doors off and rehung them. They didn't have to.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's some amazing things about this when you think about the age and the house itself. Okay, and this is what is about to be lost. The house itself, built 100 and some odd years ago, is exquisite to walk around. So you touch it and you see that this is craftsmanship that will never ever be seen again. You have brass hinges that have intricate etchings and carvings on them that, I don't know, took days for the person to do with a chisel and a hammer. And that is something that's supposed to be hidden every time the door is closed. It's that much detail.
Wow.
And I had listened in while I was trying to get the phone connection. I had listened in, and I heard you talking about the Masons and the symbology that was drawn into it. Okay, we're not the first generation to be, or yeah, I guess I could say we're not the first generation to be interested in the occult. And I believe that there's a residual force on the land that the Victorian is built on.
That's what I was wondering when Mimi had mentioned about, the stars being drawn and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, why is it there's never even number steps?
Right.
Okay? I mean, if you just go back to that, people, why? Because it's bad luck.
Mm-hmm.
All of this house was built from the ground up with a longevity in mind.
Right.
And if you just look at the geography of the land, and I've never spoken to this with anybody about this, so I'm kind of like using this as a sounding board. It is near running water. It has a lake less than 200 yards away. If all of the buildings that have grown up since it was built were removed, you would have a river that passed 200 foot from the front door.
Mm-hmm.
It has since been, the course of the stream has been changed, and what is a really great strong flow as it enters in from Winchendon into Gardner turns into a muddish crawl as it goes towards Gardner. So there is an underground water, because that water has to go somewhere.
Right.
So there's an underground flow of water. The basement is not made out of fieldstone. It's made out of milled granite.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Now, fieldstone, who had fieldstone cellars? The people who couldn't afford to get an artisan to come down and square his blocks of granite and so on and so on.
Right.
The tunnel that goes underneath it. To the best of my knowledge, I have been told that it is also lined with block granite.
That could be holding some of the energy as well as the water flowing underneath the home. Could have some tie-in with the activity that's happening there.
Absolutely.
I've heard people say that it's that they feel the house was built to hold spiritual energy.
Right.
It's 661 square feet. Now, how 6,661 square feet. To me, that's really odd.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know.
And as you said, Bill, the house was built with purpose, and being its current location and where it was built, maybe it was supposed to be a beacon to the spirit realm, or to another realm altogether. I mean,
well, I eavesdropped in on a little bit of the conversation as I said before I got picked up, and someone had mentioned, and I don't know which of you mentioned it, but about the spirit that's in the basement.
Right, I think I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not looking for controversy, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But I have never felt some evil little man down in the basement telling me to go away. I have always felt that there is an old spirit down in the basement. And I don't even think that spirit is it is an old energy.
Right.
That's down in the basement. And someone somewhere that had some sort of bona fides said, oh, this is the ghost of this guy because I did research and that's his name and that's where a good place for him to be. And again, I'm not looking for controversy. I don't understand why somebody finds a name and suddenly they feel discomfort and they feel uncomfortable, and so they name it and send it away.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're asking for controversy. You bring that up in that context.
It almost,
you're going to get it.
I understand that, but I think that it's kind of slanderous towards the names and the people and those people who were involved in that property.
Right. So we don't know for certain who it is. I've gotten that name several times from several mediums that have gotten that name. But there is the energy that we feel down there. Everybody might feel something different. Maybe it doesn't affect you in the same way that it affects me or affects Mimi, but a lot of people have experienced the same sensation of somebody being down there that doesn't want you down there and they want you to leave. So,
Absolutely. Okay, I don't say that there's not something down there that is disquieting.
I think it's because it's dark down there. I don't like dark basements anyways.
Right.
I'd rather have more light.
Certainly is that, but I mean, if we ever get the Vic up and running again, all of those plywood window coverings would be gone, and there'd be plate glass put in there, and it wouldn't be dark anymore. And your summer
it was never
kitchen,
dark. Right. It was never dark back in its heyday. That would be a very light-filled space, but they had to board it up because people kept breaking in.
And so much energy. There's so much positive energy that could be garnered from that.
Mm.
I mean, because you think that from the first floor up, that's where the family lived. Okay?
Right.
From the first floor down, that's where all the servants who were dynamic and they had their energy and they put it all in there. The very first time I went down there, I saw a guy in a pair of coveralls.
Wow.
Not a guy. Okay? I felt the presence of a guy in a pair of coveralls who was coming and going out of the closed door in the cellar.
Mm-hmm.
I'd see him, then I wouldn't see him. I'd see him, and I wouldn't see him, and then I followed him, and he was walking out the door. That's hard to believe because that's the empathic part of my vision.
Wow.
Right.
But that's where all of the people who served the meals and cooked the meals and did the yard work and tended the horses that were in the building that was next door and they lived their lives. How much time, does the average American spend at work? Double it, and that's how much time these people spent of their lives down there in that cellar.
Right.
So, very truthfully, I don't think that that's all negative energy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no. Nobody has said it was. There's a number of ghosts down in that basement. In fact, I know you're not very much sold on EVPs, but my first EVP in that house I captured in the summer kitchen, and it was a young girl who said, "I love you," on my recorder. So I just really do feel that there's a lot of energy down there. We picked up on the mail, the workman, I think he was probably a landscaper, coveralls, did a lot of work. We've even gotten the name John a couple of times. So I'm sure there's a lot of energy down in that basement. There's a lot of energy all over the way through the house. And some people are going to pick up on some things, and some people are going to pick up on other things. And, I've spent probably, out of all of the groupies for the Victorian, I think I've spent more time in that basement than anybody, because every time we'd have a tour or some kind of fundraiser, back when we were still allowed to have them, I would always be the basement person, and I would spend upwards of 7 hours solid straight down in that basement giving tours. So, I'm not saying that he's evil or negative. I just think he doesn't want people in his space, and I can appreciate that. I would be the same way.
Is it possible with the water and the granite and all that? Is it possible that there could also be numerous wormholes or portals in the home, especially in the basement where all this information's coming through?
I say yes. There's also one on the second floor. I mean, if you line up the landings from the basement all the way up to the top, it goes right through the center of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And usually when we do table tipping, we would do it right in the middle of the second floor landing, where the energy would be a portal throughout the whole, from the basement through the table up to the roof.
Joni, did you mention what happened the last time we attempted a table tipping?
I have never been. I've only been there for one table tipping, and nothing happened. So I wasn't there for that one.
On the day of your book signing.
Oh, yeah. No.
A gentleman attempted to do a table tipping, and during the setup of the table tipping, they used a table that they had used in the past. And this is a solid oak table with a center post and a 3-foot legging system. Okay? They set it up, and the table moved in a direction. And they pulled it back, and they said, put your finger here on the table. Don't put your thumb under the table, just put your finger on the table. And they attempted it again, and then the leg fell off the table. It just fell off the table. So whoever it was that happened to push the table the first time said, I don't think so. We're not going to play today.
Yeah, it was a bad idea to go down the cellar. We never even introduced ourselves.
Yeah, I was outside, so I missed all that, but I did hear about it when people came up. I heard the leg shot across the room. It didn't just fall off, right? It went across the room a distance.
Right.
No, it's like somebody pulled it off.
I'm sorry?
It was like somebody pulled it off, because that's our table. And, and it was, there's a peg in it, and it was glued, so there was no way this leg was going to fall off, and it just, like somebody gently grabbed it and pulled it off. Wow. So then we realized it was time to go back upstairs. It says, ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
So we can never use that table again, but we do have more tables, but we can't use that one again because it's not strong anymore.
I'll head on down to a flea market and pick one up, because I have never experienced a table tipping. I would love to participate in that.
All right. Whenever we do one in the future, once they get the house all squared away, we'll do another one.
What is a table tipping? Is that like a seance of sorts?
Yeah, it's like a seance. It's a form of divination, and it's a spirit communication as well. And you're communicating with the spirit through the physical mediumship. So when we have our hands on the table, all our energy is gathered into the center of the table, and the spirits pick up on our energy.
Mm-hmm.
And we bring in a table guide that can only lead one spirit at a time into the table, and it's only spirits that are coming from the light. We don't invite any other spirit that's not associated or with the house at all, because we don't want to have, more people in there than there already are.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much safer than a Ouija board.
Right.
Yeah. But, it's a different way of communicating with the spirits. And we protect ourselves really well. We cast magic circles. We bring in the white light. We all wear our symbols of protection that's, associated with our beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
We use frankincense and myrrh. Some people use sage, but frankincense and myrrh is longer lasting, and it's stronger. So it's more protective as well. We'll use sea salt, and the sea salt creates a protection. It opens our psychic centers, and it also creates a sacred space. Sometimes the table can take 5 minutes to move. Sometimes it can take a half an hour. Sometimes it won't even move at all. But I mean, we asked for answers about the house. And at one time, we were doing a session there, and the table literally tipped over.
Wow!
And it went over and banged up against the safe. And so we're like, well, let's pick this table back up. So we picked it up, and we asked if they were trying to give us some information, and it spelled out the letter S, and then it went back and spelled out the letter O. So we're like, so what do you mean, so what? So it spelled out again. So the table went back on the floor, went over to the safe, and kept banging on it. So Ken gets down on the floor, and he's got a flashlight, and he's looking, and he finds, looks like two little dice, and one says S, and the other one says O. So everybody's like, oh, my goodness, that's so cool. And then he's back under there. He goes, wait, I see something else under here. It was a key, one of the skeleton keys. So we had asked the table the significance of it, and it tapped out the number 9. So skeleton key number 9, Edwin and Lillian went up to the 3rd floor, and room number 9 was a billiard room. That was the only, the key only locked and opened that door, none of the other ones upstairs. So that was validation right there that, you get answers.
Maybe they wanted you in that room for some reason.
I guess so. We don't know what. I mean, after that, we were just all excited that, they had validation. They had a key. We had the dice.
Right.
And we were so excited that we lost our energy and we stopped doing the table.
I truly hope that someday a factual documentary, because the facts themselves are far more impressive than the Hollywood hype that we got from in A Haunting, where everything was just like all screaming and slamming and banging. That is not all that the Victorian is.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The protective spirit that has been there, the kitchen table that just, for some reason, everyone is able to talk and communicate around that kitchen table, and time just slips away. And Joni will attest to that. You sit down at 8 o'clock, the next thing you know, the sun is rising.
Oh yeah, and it's the strangest thing. I've never, I don't sit a lot. I have to get up, and I can't sit still. I've been up walking around while I've been on this show, but that table, you sit down, and I don't know if it's a combination of people or just the harmony of the room itself. It's a safe room. It just feels really good in there, and we just have so many good times sitting around that table talking. And like Bill said, the next thing you know, the sun's rising. You're like, oh my God, I got to go to work in 4 hours. What am I doing?
But that's why I would love to get it documented before it's gone. Let's reaffirm or validate that there is magic left in the world, and this address has magic in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not all screaming and being possessed and being overtaken and hearing growling animals, which my personal scary part. All these things, it's not all that. It's wonderful too. You sit in the white room with the room with the white fireplace, and you just look out the windows, and you go back in time. And the room with the black fireplace, I always go in there, and I see gentlemen in vests or waistcoats and cigars and pipes, sitting and talking about the movers and shakers of the day.
Right.
That is the magic that is in the house, and I guess there's a difference between the magic of the address and the haunting of what Edwin and Lillian have gone through. And I'm not belittling what they've gone through at all. It's just that the reason they keep going back after all of these terrible things is that the magic, the sparkle, the unicorns and rainbows, they're there they are there too. Sorry, old guy.
Sorry.
Yeah. And we're all very passionate about the house. You can tell by listening to us. And this is only three of us. There's a lot more people involved in this. And so we've taken upon ourselves to set up this foundation that we're trying to raise money to save the house. And we've been told that it probably only has a couple years before it's past the point of no return. And our goal, our mission is to raise enough money and to get enough awareness and possibly people that can help and maybe donate supplies or donate their hard work and try to get this house fixed, not because we're fixing it for some homeowners that can't afford to fix it, but because it's a piece of history, and once it's gone, and you can't replace it.
What about having a paranormal conference to raise money in the home for the home?
We're not allowed to.
Oh, you're
that
not
would be
allowed
wonderful. That would be wonderful, but no, the town shut them down because it needs to have certain safety precautions inside of it before you can allow the public into it. They were having investigations and tours and whatnot. And everything you hear about us talking about now is all of, the friends of Edwin and Lillian. Sometimes we still go over with them as, guests at the home and we do stuff, but, very infrequently. But they would have to have, the house has no running water right now because there's some plumbing issues. There are no sprinkler systems. The town wants them to set it up to be handicap accessible, which I think is something that maybe they can fight that because that doesn't seem. I've been to Lizzie Borden, which is also in Massachusetts, and I can tell you there's no elevator in there. But some of the other precautions, emergency lighting in all the areas, and emergency exit signs, and all that takes money. I mean, it's. Just to get the emergency lighting in, we got a quote of like $2,300, or just for the exit signs.
Wow.
So, because you're not just dealing with a new house where you're finding an electrical current and you're tapping into it. You're having to go all the way to the fuse box because you may be dealing with, electrical wiring that's 50 years old, and you can't just tap into that. So it needs a lot before it can be brought back up. They just want to save. Our purpose is to save the house. We don't care what they do with it after we're done. We just want the house to still be there in another 100 years.
Right. What about having a conference at another location to raise money to redo or
that would be feasible.
Renovate, yeah.
That would be feasible. Well, I'm having another book signing at the house. I just had one in August, and I'm having another one in October 12th. And we set up a tent outside, and I've invited a lot of people like Bill and Mimi and other people. Michael Robichaud, he just messaged me. He's not going to be able to call in tonight, but he won't be there either because he lives in Virginia. But a lot of the people that have been involved in the writing of the book, the stories that I told, I interviewed 24 people at least and shared their stories. A lot of those people will be on hand to share their stories, and we're going to, I am donating half of my profits of the book to the Save the Victorian Foundation, and then we're going to have a lot of gift baskets and raffle baskets and stuff like that for sale. We're going to have T-shirts available, so, and we do have a GoFundMe account, and I can post it on the Z-Talk page on Facebook.
Okay.
So we're trying to raise money and awareness, and people can also message me on Facebook if they have, a box of nails, or they have a strong back and they want to help us with the roof, or, another box of shingles, or, anything helps. And, we're not doing this because we're greedy and we're trying to make this into a place where we can make money. We're doing it because we want to save a piece of history, plain and simple. We love this house. We don't want to see it fall.
I can tell by the passion in the three of your voices that you're very, you love this property and you're very passionate about wanting it preserved. So to me, that's really cool that you take so much interest in a home like that.
Well, we're thankful we were chosen for this mission.
Mm-hmm. Like I said earlier, maybe the house, drew you into it because it wanted saved.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't think anybody who's on that list of the people who want to save the Vic, that Joni, is it Joni? You're not running it. Lucky's running it, right?
We're running it on a board. So Lucky Belcamino is involved, as well as her wife, Candace Belcamino. She's on the board as well. Lucky's doing an amazing job right now. She's going on. I went with her the other day, and we went to all the hardware stores and lumber yards in Gardner, and gave them a flyer, told them what we're trying to do, and asked them if they, could donate anything. And we've got volunteers going around hanging up those flyers all around Gardner just to raise awareness, to let people know what we're doing. And Lucky set up the GoFundMe, and she's been a dynamo, getting a lot of stuff done. And, we've all pitched in and done what we can. And, we're not going to stop until this house is, it's, the roof, really, that's our biggest goal right now, get that roof and the eaves done. And at least it's buttoned up. Right now, the elements can come right in, and they do. Every time it rains, water floods down into the chimney, down into the walls. So we have to do something, or else it's going to be gone.
Mm.
I got some flyers today, and I'm going to be handing them out in this area down here in Salem, and there's a lot of nice New Age and Wiccan shops down there, and I'll be posting a lot of flyers down there.
Well,
some people have already started advertising.
Well, one of the most beautiful thing about this is that it's a non-denominational magic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you can be born again, you can be Wicca, you can be shamanistic. If you walk through the halls with your hands jammed down in your pockets and just walking around, you'll pretty soon be able to close your eyes and feel the magic of it.
Mm-hmm.
And if Edwin and Lillian go through all the things that they've gone through, and that is terrifying. I mean, really, just imagine going through that. Your wife is possessed. Okay? Lillian, to be possessed. And yet, to keep coming back because the magic is real. And it's the only place on earth that I am aware of where I feel, well, personally, I can only speak personally.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only place on earth where I can walk through the door and feel the magic.
Wow.
Hair stands up. The second sight kicks in. Joni has something that I would associate it. I in my mind's eye, I associate it with Tenia. But she has something that her ears ring. I get an ability to breathe that I don't have anywhere else. It just energizes. Just the air inside energizes, and so. But it's about to go. It's about to be gone. Anyway, this is supposed to be an entertaining paranormal, not a Save the Victorian, right?
Right.
Be whatever we want.
I get so sidetracked when I start thinking
No, that's fine. And my book supports the mission. That's the whole reason why I wrote it. I'm so excited that it's grown. And this happened at my last book signing. It was funny because all of the people in the story have not come together like they did that day at the book signing, and they started talking to each other, and they started getting ideas, and they started getting excited, and they got Edwin excited, and they're like, wow, we can really do something here. We want to help. What can we all do together to help save this house? And it just really, it just snowballed from there. It was just wonderful. So it's like a lot of things came together. Mimi and Ken working on the doors. It was the nicest thing to walk up to the house and see those beautiful doors after they've just been weather-worn for decades. And now they're glossy and gorgeous. They look just like they were hung yesterday. And,
thank you.
And it really got us all excited. We're like, wow, if they did that, what else can we do? And it's like, hot damn, let's do the roof. So it's a big, ambitious adventure, but we're willing to take it on. And, anytime somebody buys my book, half those profits go to Edwin and Lillian, or to the Foundation Fund, the nonprofit, where a board of directors decides where that money goes. And, our top priority is obviously the roof and eaves right now. But we're all focusing on trying to do what we can to save this house.
I would love to be able to walk into a house and just be able to breathe and have all that negative energy gone. It's something that I really need to be able to do. And you don't find very many locations in your life that you can actually do that and be relaxed and be able to breathe and be able to feel
No,
positive.
they come down and greet you.
Energy.
Well, I feel it as clairaudient as a sensitive. I feel them like little kids romping to the door, like Joni's here, Joni's here. You know, they do that when any of us come. They go running to the door because they're excited to see us. You know, so it's just it's always nice to go into a place and everybody knows your name. You know?
We're going to call it cheers. Well, I would not recommend that you go in there without protections and awareness.
Yeah.
Okay? Because as powerful as the magic is, it's magic. Okay? You don't measure it with a yardstick or a scale. It's magic. And sometimes really fantastic things happen. Like when Joni said, she comes into the house and she feels the kids running down the stairs to come see her. Well, it's think of it as a balance. There's some really good things that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And there could be, and there have been, it's been documented, some bad things that have happened. Okay?
Right.
Now, so you mentioned about just walk in there, you know, and let it happen. I don't go anywhere near that property unless I'm wearing my copper, I have my woven brass, I've got my my stone and bone necklace, and all my totems, because I am going to open myself up to a wonderful experience.
Right.
But I'm an empath. Joni's a sensitive. There have been mediums. Those are the rock stars of the psychic world, the mediums.
Mm-hmm.
They can have a conversation. I just get images. Joni, I think Joni's on her way to becoming a medium.
Right.
Okay, she's exercising the muscle that makes it work. But if you open yourself up to the experience, you don't halfway open the door.
It's either all or nothing.
Absolutely. It's like you can't open up the window and say, keep the rain out, but let the wind in. You know?
Right.
And so you have your protections. Those of you who have been inside the Vic and you know, and you believe. If you believe, then it's there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay? So the idea of just walking in there and casually, wow, just please protect yourself, just as a warning from somebody who's been in there.
Right.
Okay?
I don't go anywhere without my stones or without my St. Michael or St. Benedict around my neck. I don't even leave my apartment without it, without having that with me.
Right. And these things that we believe in, we empower them.
Right.
So it's not like a Christian with the Saint, a Catholic with the Saint fill in the blank, Eustace, Anthony, whatever, medal, goes in there. If he or she believes in that medal, then it works.
Right.
If I believe that 2 sticks tied together with hemp rope and the cardinal points not across like in an X, and have the cardinal points carved into the ends of the sticks.
Mm-hmm.
And if I believe in that, then I empower it.
Right.
And so I have heard people say, I walk in the light. I bathe myself in light. I wish I had the ability to visualize that.
Right.
Okay? I am, for my defenses, I'm more of an active, reactive. I don't know if you know what a reactive armor is, but it's not armor until something tries to get into it, and then it explodes and pushes it away.
Oh,
that's
okay.
how I experience it.
Mm.
I would say earth magic, woodsy magic, but my power is water.
Oh, okay.
So it works for me.
Right.
Whatever works for you, there's no this one's right and that one's wrong. If it works for you, it works.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So.
Yep, most definitely. So.
We had a someone trying to call from 617. Unfortunately, I can't really bring them on because I'm only limited to three people on the line at the same time.
If they're still trying to call in, I can excuse myself.
We only have a couple minutes left on the show anyways, so.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, and I will let whoever it is that's in by Boston come in and finish up your show for you. Thank you very much, Joni, for including me in this, and I really appreciate having this kind of an avenue to speak to people of like mind.
Exactly. It was great talking to you as well.
Have a great day.
I want to thank you, and thank you, Joni, for allowing me to be on the show, and for your host.
And I'll see you.
All right, thank you.
It was great
All
talking
right,
to you
have a
guys.
great night.
All right.
You're staying with this band, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Have a great. All right.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
evening. Goodbye.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for calling in, guys.
Okay.
All right. The Boston caller, go ahead and call in. I believe it was from the 617 area code. Yeah, go ahead and call in with your question or comment for Joni. We got about 15 minutes left of the show here, so go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah. So if they want to call back in, feel free to. The lines are open.
Okay.
Wow, that was a fast 2 hours, Joni.
I know. I love having people call in to talk about it because, it goes from being, my story or Edwin and Lillian's story to it's everybody's story that's been a part of this. And, everybody that can call in has a different experience. And I think the person calling in from the 617 would be Kim Curative. And hopefully she'll call back in. She was a medium that spent a lot of time there and has some really creepy experiences. So, everybody has different experiences there. It's just the reaction of the ghosts that are there to them. So some people have nothing but negative. I mean, we've had a lot of people scratched and pushed. And, even recently, we were hanging out there the other day talking about what we could do to save the Victorian. And my friend MJ suddenly developed scratches on her back that were all welted up, and we were trying to figure out there's no way that she could have done it herself, and if somebody else had done it, they would have, she would have felt it. It was just all of a sudden somebody noticed welts on her back, and I was like, wow, what's that?
Right.
So I mean, she's never done anything negative to the house. She's a sweet person, so why would they target her over somebody else, like somebody coming in provoking or something? So it's just really hard to explain.
Right. We have that caller from Boston. Go ahead with your message.
Yes, hi. Is this where you call in for your haunted Victorian experiences?
Hi, Edwin.
Hi, Joni. How are you?
I'm good. What a surprise. This is Edwin Gonzalez, the owner of the Victorian.
Oh, wow.
How you doing? I'm sorry. I only caught the last 15 minutes of it. I don't know the host's name.
Yes, my name is Timothy Roxbury. I'm the host of this Supernatural Realm. It airs every Friday at 6 to 8 Eastern. Actually, 6 to 9 because I have another hour. But.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to chime in because I was listening to some of the stories, and I just wanted to thank everybody who came on, and I wanted to quickly talk about some of the things that we had to encounter and endure for those 2.5 years that we lived here.
Sure.
If you have, I don't know how much time I have.
Actually, I have an hour until Warren's show comes on, so feel free to talk as much as you want to.
Oh, okay. I mean, I'll try to get as much as I can talk about because I do have to work tonight, the overnight. But okay. I would love to talk about some of the stuff because you have to understand from where we came from. We never had encountered anything. We originally both Lillian and I are from Boston, and when we saw the home online, we just got Lillian got so excited because it was one of her dreams to own the Victorian, a Victorian ever since she was a young girl. So when we went there, I didn't even have a say. The minute she walked in, it felt like he was going back in time, and she fell in love with it instant, and she goes, this house is mine. So I was like, oh, okay, there goes my decision, so I know that we're going to own this. And sure enough, the minute that, it took a while, it took a little bit over 2-3 months before we actually signed, when it officially became ours. Through that time, we did hear some rumors, but we thought that the whole thing was really silly. We didn't believe in ghosts and things like that, so we thought, that just, we didn't really think too much about it. We just were non-believers. But sure enough, the minute that it officially became ours, that weekend we started experiencing things, from loud, unexplained bangs that we would hear when we're moving things in to things actually moving. We just gathered around in the kitchen, everybody's moving in boxes, when all of a sudden these two big giant metal plant holders just started moving. They basically skipped a few inches. And we thought it was something wrong with the floor, and that started the beginning. And then there was other things that we kept finding. We would come back and forth like 3 times, and we kept finding, Lillian wanted to decorate the mantle, and she kept finding one of the ornaments, a Christmas ornament, in the middle of the floor. What was striking about it was that it never shattered. We thought it had fallen off, but the weird thing is we tested it, and sure enough, the minute we dropped it from the mantle, it shattered. So we didn't have no explanation for that. Meanwhile, while I was staying in Boston, Lillian would make her own rounds to Gardner by herself, and she decided never to tell me this after years later. So I'm hearing a story that like 3 or 4 years later we were being interviewed for Paranormal Witness. And apparently when Lillian would come down by herself, she loved being in the basement. She was trying to organize everything. Everything has its place. And every so often she would notice something, a shadow that would go from one side to another side. The basement, these are huge, the basement is huge, so it's like at least 15 feet up, 12 feet tall perhaps, and she would see these things that would dart from all over the place. And she felt uncomfortable, but she tried not to let it bother her until she saw one hover over her, a big shadow, like a big mass, and that's the one where she felt uncomfortable, and she just left out of there, but she just, she's pretty much tough, but that really bothered her. But she never told me that story because she didn't want to alarm me. So I'm finding out that story many years later. So that was one of the things that we first encountered, because we weren't officially going to move in until the next spring. And and then so we're excited. Here we are. It's spring 2009, and then it was a series of unexplained things that basically took a toll out on both of us. Mm-hmm. It is really weird because throughout the whole time that we were there, Lillian would experience things by herself. There was things that I would experience, and there was things we would experience together. But they were a little bit different from one another, which I couldn't quite understand that. For example, I was the one who kept seeing the shadows and the apparitions and feeling as though something is there, and also feeling when I would see the apparition, I can actually feel what it was trying to, which is really bizarre. I didn't understand the whole thing. Everything was new to us. All I know is we were encountering all these things, and I started documenting it, trying to find a rhyme or reason why this was happening. And then it wasn't until that I saw, which completely affected my whole outlook on life and everything, when I was in my office, which was originally the nursery. And, I'm excited. It's about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It's daytime. And I just wanted to rush when all of a sudden I saw something dark in the corner. And then when I turned my head, this figure popped up. And there it was, just staring down at me, which completely startled me to the point where I started shaking uncontrollably. I did not do very well. I didn't understand it. That left such a bad imprint on me when I saw I could make out the details of his face. I could make out his eyes. I could make out everything. And the weird thing about it is I can even feel what it was trying to tell me, which I don't understand that whole concept of it, and I'm still trying to figure that out. Mm-hmm. And when Lillian came up and she told me, "Were you okay?" and I said, "I just saw something in the office," that's when basically what she told me was just try to relax, calm down, go across the street and grab something to eat. And there was a commotion going on, and I asked the owner, is everything okay? And he said, "Oh, no, there was a gentleman who just had a fatal heart attack, and he died out in the parking lot." And I was thinking about the family, and I was thinking it's horrible. And as I gathered back into the house, thinking about that, that's when it dawned on me that around the precise time that I actually saw something was about the precise time that someone had just passed on. across
wow.
the street. So I didn't understand that concept either. I don't understand if what I saw was that, and then I had to make a call to the previous owner, and I spoke to the gentleman who owned the house before, and then he started telling me about some of the things that he encountered. And one of the things, which was the first time I had heard anything about it, was the child, where he would sit in the dining room reading the newspaper and late at night, and he would see a little boy run up the stairs. And he would see this every so often, and one time he decided he thought it was his son who got out of bed, so he went to go check on him, but he's sound asleep. And he also told me that when he was younger, they used to have a baby monitor in his room, and every so often he would hear his son having a conversation with someone. And which was bizarre, and he started telling me that, and I started telling him what I had seen and some of the things that we experienced, and so that's when that was the beginning of knowing that, you know, the house was active. Sure enough, after experiencing even more bizarre things, including some of the things that really frightened me, so for example, I'll give you another story. It's late at night, 1 o'clock in the morning, and me and Lillian is just saying our good nights. And sometimes I have to ask Lillian, like, does she hear? Does she? Can she? Like, sometimes you get these certain like smells. For example, sometimes you'll be in the master bedroom and you would smell. It smelled like a campfire, just pertained to one little area, which I didn't quite understand. And every so often, so I would ask her, like, do you hear that, or do you feel that, or something? And we're just laying there saying good night, and when all of a sudden, I asked Lillian, do you hear that? And sure enough, she says it's coming from above. And right on the ceiling you can hear, or we're on the second floor, but the third floor you can hear someone running. But it didn't sound like an adult. It sounded like a child. So then, and I said, well, what does it sound like? And she goes, it sounds like a kid running. And all of a sudden this thing just it runs from one side all the way to the other side, and this is starting to really, like, my heart starts pounding. Mm-hmm. And my eyes are wide open, and Lillian is like, she didn't make it into such a big deal. She didn't think much about it, and then she fell asleep about 10 minutes later when all of a sudden this thing starts becoming louder and louder, and it starts becoming from one side of the ceiling all the way across. And then the next thing I know, it's coming within the room, which really started freaking me out because I can hear it from the fireplace running across. I didn't handle that very well. Mm-hmm. I know that it really took a toll on me, and my heart starts racing, and I learned later that wasn't such a wise thing to do, that you shouldn't let it get to you. But at the time, it was almost like I was feeding into it because I was so nervous and scared, I guess. And that kind of also. So for a while there, I didn't know how to react. I didn't know what to do. All I know is all this stuff was happening, and I didn't know how to handle it. And then we would get some other, another thing that would happen. If you ask me, the most haunted room is the master bedroom. But, like, for example, we would get the female voice. Mm-hmm. She has it sounded like a young woman, and it's always the same voice, and it sounded like some type of a chanting. So I would be, asleep, and sometimes eventually when me and Lillian would just have conversation, she would describe the same voice I heard. So I knew that there was something in that room that was a female that was trying to communicate with her. But for the life of us, neither one of us could figure out what it was saying. So again, it happened again. So at this particular time, it was probably like my fourth or fifth time hearing the same voice, and I found out later, Lillian heard the same later, that when we decided to talk about it later on, she said that she described the same thing. But what happened was, when we both heard this, we kind of ignored it. And it was really chilly that evening, and Lillian has two thick blankets, and you can barely even see her. You can only see her eyes because it's so chilly there. And she woke up because her blankets were completely pulled off her. Two thick blankets, which has never happened to her before. And I remember her getting up, and it was really early. It was like about 7 o'clock in the morning, and usually we don't get up that early because I started work a little bit later than that. But she got up, and she walked in front of the bed, and she started singing a lullaby, which is, anybody who knows Lillian, that's not her normal routine. She usually doesn't say anything to anyone until she has a cup of coffee.
Right.
So she proceeded to go into the bathroom, which usually it takes a while to warm up. It's such a huge bathroom. And so she went and she took a cold shower, basically. She came out, and next thing I know, she's dressed up with her hair done, makeup, and nice clothes. And I'm thinking naturally she's going to go do a couple of errands or do something. So I decided to start work a little bit earlier. So I'm sitting on my desk, and it's about 8 o'clock. And the next thing I know, every so often I glance outside, I notice that the car was still there. And it's so quiet, I don't hear a sound throughout the whole house, and I decide to, and then it's like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and I take my headset off, and the car never, the car was there, she never left, but it's quiet. And so I'm like, where is she?
Huh.
So at noon, I decided to take off my headset, and I started going on a mission, still going around the whole house looking for her. It's 26 rooms, so it took a little while. So finally, I went down to the basement, and I can hear a little shuffling. As I'm going down to the halfway down the staircase, I can see her, and she's in a corner, and she's been digging for literally like 5 hours. And I'm looking at her because she has a nice blouse on, and it's completely filthy black from soot, and she's really dirty. And I was like, I didn't understand. Looking at her, like, what's wrong with her, and why is she doing this, and why is she dressed up doing this? I didn't understand what was going on. And I asked her, and I said, "Hun, what are you doing?" And she just looked straight at me. She says, I don't know what I'm doing. And then when I countered with when she said that, I said, what do you mean you don't know what you're doing? She snapped at me, which was for no reason. She just snapped at me and said, leave me alone. I got to finish this. And I was like, okay. I just went upstairs and didn't even bother asking her anything else. And as I sat there, about 15 minutes later, she comes running up. Her mood had completely changed, and she's happy as can be. And she goes, hun, I found something. And I said, you found something? And sure enough, she sticks out her hand, and I could see something, and it looks like a bone. And I said, what's that? And she goes, it's a pelvic bone. I know it's a pelvic bone. And I didn't understand. She doesn't know what a pelvic bone looks like. As far as we never, it's not something that we would. And she had this bone, and it was huge. And I was like, I don't get it. Like, what do you mean? And did you find anything else? And she said that she found some other, like a garter belt, and she found some other bones and newspaper articles that dated back to 1910, and so she did find quite a lot of different things. And she did. And I asked her, do you remember you doing this? Like, do you remember while you were digging, and what was the? And she goes, she doesn't remember all of it. She only remembers that every so often she would, as she was doing it, she says, what am I doing? She would find herself saying to herself, what am I doing this? But she knew that she had to keep going.
Wow.
And yeah, so it was almost like she was under something that was trying to
reveal something.
And then after, yeah, it's really bizarre. The whole thing is strange. And for me, not knowing very little about hauntings or paranormal, we both didn't know how to react to certain things that were going on.
Mm-hmm.
Now we know better because of what people have told us, and we learned more as time went on. And it just became sort of like that, like it was nonstop. And then we would get things in sequences of threes, which I didn't understand what that meant. So, for example, again, 7 o'clock in the morning, real quick, I got to tell you this story. It's 7 o'clock in the morning when all of a sudden the doorbell rings twice, and Lillian nudges me and she says, get up, there's somebody here. And I in my head, I was thinking it was somebody who I had spoken to the day before that was supposed to do some work on the house. And I said, I don't know why they're here so early. I didn't tell them to come down. This is what I'm thinking. And then all of a sudden I heard the third doorbell. So the doorbell had rang 3 times. As I swung around to put on my sandals, and we have these huge doors right in the master bedroom. They're, 10 feet, 8 feet tall and 300-pound doors, and someone's banging on the door, 3 bangs.
Jeez.
And, and to be honest with you, we knew that we were experiencing things, but I was still strong enough in both of us to believe that this is not real. It's almost like we try not to let it get to us. I tried my best. So in other words, I thought that there was somebody behind that door. Mm-hmm. It had to be a person.
Right.
And the only person that I thought that could have been there that early or only one person has the key would be Lillian's brother. We had given him the key when we first moved in, so we thought it was him. But we didn't understand why he was there so early. So quickly Lillian got up. She went looking out the window to see if she could see someone. And sure enough, I quickly ran. I mean, within a second and a half, I leaped from the bed and I opened up that door, and there was nobody there. And, you're
Wow.
looking and you're scratching, and you don't understand what's going on, and then you quickly run downstairs and you look to see who's been ringing the doorbell, and there's not a soul to be found.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't understand that. All I knew that it really affected us because I felt that it was trying to tell us something, almost
Right.
like some type of a warning, like you need to get your butt up now. That's the way I took it as. And that whole day I was a little bit nervous, thinking something was going to happen, but nothing happened.
Right.
And then another story that I have to tell you, which is quite fascinating, because we just had an experience similar to this not too long ago. It was, I remember the date. It was June 1st, 2011, that's how it imprinted in my head. And I'm sitting in my office, and next door there's some neighbors, and a U-Haul truck moves in, and I see a mother moving in with two young children. One's about 5, the other one's about 7. And, they're on our yard, and they're running all over the place, and, and every so often I would look out, and I noticed that the younger one of the two kept looking and staring at something up on what appeared to be the third floor window. And I didn't, you're not thinking too much. And then the next thing I know, I go back to work. And the next day I'm back to work and the kids are running around. And again, this time the younger one is staring at something really intense. Like he would, sometimes like 10 minutes in a row, he's staring at something. And I'm like, perhaps he's looking at birds because we do have a lot of birds there. Maybe we're thinking he's looking at birds. So I didn't pay too much mind to it. The next day I go outside and I'm on the porch and the woman next door says, "Hi, I'm your new neighbor. My name is Kate." And, and I said, "Oh, my name's Edwin." And she goes, "It's a pleasure meeting you." And she goes, "Well, how many?" She's looking around me. She's looking above me and around me. And she goes, "Well, how many kids do you have?" And I'm looking. I was like, "What are you looking at?" And she goes, "I'm just looking to see if I see any toys." "Oh, we don't have any children. We don't have any kids at all." And she looked at me. She took a step back, almost like as though she didn't believe me.
Right.
And I said, "Why do you ask?" And she goes, "Because." She points to Joshua, was right next to her. His youngest son name is Joshua. He goes, "Joshua tells me that the little boy upstairs wants him to play with him in a big hallway." And I'm like, "Huh? What do you mean?" And she goes, "Yeah, Joshua says that there's a little boy that he sees upstairs in the third floor, and sometimes she'll see him downstairs." And then that's when Lillian comes running outside, and she goes, "You're seeing a boy? What can you tell me? What does he look like or anything?" And he goes, so Joshua goes, "Yeah, sometimes I see him way up there, but yesterday I saw him down here, but his mommy won't let him come out and play. Can I go play with him?" I'm really demanding, like, can I go play with him?
Wow.
And then Lillian's like, "I'm sorry, sweetie, we don't have a little boy." And he goes, "Yes, you do. Can I go play with him?" And it was kind of like, you kind of like shocked for a moment, and we were like, "We don't." And finally, when we did let him in, he did run upstairs. And there is a big hallway, and he ran into the nanny's room and says, "This is where I see him," which was really creepy in itself because in my particular case, the year before, on the other side, there was a neighbor. And this is a gentleman who's a little bit older, he's one of those, I don't know how to describe, but like a tough guy, like, "Hey, how you doing?" like that.
Right.
And he's like, "Hey, Eddie, how you doing?" He's always walking, hey, I don't believe in that stuff. I don't believe in those ghosts. I don't believe in none of that. So that's how he is. So then every so often we have small conversations. So I'm in the yard doing some yard work, and he calls me over, and he goes, "Hey, Eddie, come here." And I say, "What's up, Mike? How you doing?" And he goes, "Man, I didn't know you had a son." I was like, "Mike, I don't have a son." And he goes, "Who's the little boy that runs back and forth? I see him from one side of the house, and I see him run across to the other side." And I said, "We don't have a son. I don't know what to tell you." He goes, "Well, do you have like a family member?" I'm like, "I have a nephew, but he's 21 years old, and he ain't running back and forth on the window." So then he goes, he was scratching his head. We're both looking at each other like we had two heads. We didn't understand one another. And finally, I let him in, and he was shocked because basically he thought it was a long hallway that would go from one side of the house all the way to the other side.
Right.
In reality, there's a huge wall, the grand staircase, and another wall. So he's seen him go through two walls and a staircase.
Wow.
So, and that was bizarre. And then just the other day, I'm not sure if we were out in the yard. This was just last Sunday. We were in front of the house, and there's a little boy who lives a couple of doors down, and he went across the street, and he's looking up, and he's waving at someone. And we're all, accounted for. We're downstairs in the outside the stairs. And the next thing you know, from what I remember, he just basically left. And then he came back, and we asked him, I forget who it was. I'm not sure if it was Joni, but asked him, what do you...
Yeah.
Huh?
Lucky yelled at him, "Hey, what are you looking at?" And he said, and he got like scared and ran back home again.
Yeah, it was bizarre, and and it was really weird because I started thinking about another time that I was in the house when I was again on my office, and Lillian was downstairs in the kitchen, and it was just so happened, which is kind of ironic. We were both looking out the window at the same time, and we saw this woman with a young child, and she's staring up at the window. Again, it's for the third one. She's pointing, when all of a sudden she grabs her son and she starts running down the street, and we're like, what is she looking at that freaked her out so bad that she decides to grab her son and decides to run? Like, it was really bizarre. I could never understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and there was other things that were similar to that people will experience.
Right.
So
Bill
again,
Bill said that the lights would turn on in the house and there'd be no electricity there.
Yeah, that was another strange one. It was the same thing. It was a new neighbor who moved in next door, but up on the second floor. And all of a sudden, Lillian, I had never met him before. I didn't get a chance to meet him, but Lillian, she went outside and he went downstairs to introduce himself, and he goes, yeah, it's nice to meet you. And I said, yeah, I haven't met your husband yet, but I see him all the time. He's upstairs. I see him up on the third floor. Looks like he's working out or he's doing something. The light is up on the third floor, and I can see him like moving like he's on a treadmill. And Lillian's looking at him, like staring at him. She goes, there's a problem with that. First of all, there's no gym equipment up there. There's no electricity, and Edwin doesn't like going in that room. So he was like kind of shocked, and he was like, again, just looking at her like in disbelief. He didn't believe her. So it was just things like that you can't quite grasp what people are seeing. I don't. But that's quite fascinating with the child. The only things that we found about linked to the child is we know that Rachel, who was actually the granddaughter of Edward, she had passed away there, and there was an accident that happened in front of the house many years. It was probably at least 100 years, and those are the only two links that we have. As far as children linked to the house that either passed away, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Could there be?
It's quite a lot that goes on, but it really does take a toll out on you. And I could tell you another story which is quite fascinating, which still I'm scratching my head about. We were getting the doorbell ringing all day long, and we thought it was the local kids that were, just giving us a hard time. Oh, can we come in the haunted house? There's always so many people knocking on the door saying, can we just come in? And sure enough, and I said, I think I know which kids are doing this. So me and Lillian decided to make a plan. I was going to hide behind the staircase. Lillian was going to hide behind the kitchen. There's two entrances. There's the union side, the servant side, and then the main entrance. So sure enough, the doorbell rings probably about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I bolted out to the front door of the main entrance. Lillian bolted out to the servant side, and we were going to see which kids were ringing the doorbell. And here we are. We're running outside. We're looking behind the bushes. We're looking behind the cars. We're looking around to see if there's any kids. There's nobody to be found. As I walked outside and ran down the stairs, we noticed that the doorbell kept ringing. So we met up in the front of the house, and we're looking at this doorbell, and it keeps ringing and ringing. And we're like, why is the doorbell ringing? When we walked up to the doorbell, it had been depressed in. It stayed stuck. And it just kept ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing. But we didn't quite understand if the doorbell rang and I ran outside within a fraction of a second. Who pressed the doorbell? Why did it get stuck? Which is the thing that I couldn't quite get. It was almost like playing a game with us. And it was just things like that we would encounter. And then again, sequences of threes. Doorbells would ring 3 times. The piano would play 3 times. The TV would shut off and on. And, when you hear these stories as a kid, you're like, well, what's a typical haunted house? And then when you're experiencing it, it kind of like, it really, you really don't know what to it's just so hard to try to understand and try to deal with it. It just took so much out of us. It just affected us so much mentally and physically, because after a while, like for me, I will be in my office and things would just start happening. You hear the footsteps, and all of a sudden my heartbeat starts pounding because I didn't know how to react. It wasn't until someone told me you need to get up and tell her to leave you alone. And sure enough, when I would do that, and you have to be firm, it would stop. Mm-hmm. So I learned that, and so it was quite a lot. And for me, I was fascinated with the house because of the history. There was, I was always been fascinated with history, and I love everything about history. To know that P.T. Barnum walked down the same hallway that I walked in, and Calvin Coolidge, and when he was a politician before he became president, things like that were, to me, I found fascinating, and other people as well.
How did you
historic?
How did you find out about the home?
The home? Well, we're from Boston, so we knew very little or just about nothing about Gardner. All we knew is that we both were thinking about. We were actually not planning on buying a house. We were thinking about maybe one day we could maybe look into a house, but we knew that it was in Boston. Lillian has a passion for Victorians, but obviously in Boston, a Victorian would be worth, I don't know, minimum $2 million, $3 million, maybe for a Victorian. and I had an opportunity to work from home. So I decided my sister-in-law actually went online and she saw this house, and it was the ideal type of home that Lillian loves, Second Empire Victorian. And she immediately fell in love with it, and I quickly glanced at it, and I said, I can't afford it, because I'm thinking the house is minimum $2 million or something like that, or even 1 point something million at least. And we were shocked to find out what it was listed for, and I was like, why? And I didn't quite get that. And I remember the initial call when I called the realtors, and I said, I'm interested in a house in 4 West Broadway. And there was like a 3-minute pause, 3-second pause. She didn't say absolutely nothing. And I said, hello? I said, I'm interested in a house on 4 West Broadway. And she goes, you sure you want to see that? And I'm like, huh? I hesitated because I didn't understand what she was talking. And then I started thinking, well, maybe there's something wrong with the I don't know, the plumbing or something, or the electric work, and that's why she was like not, she wasn't. It didn't sound like she was trying to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I said, well, no, we're serious. We're from Boston. We'd love to take a look at it. And we quickly made an appointment, and 3 days later we were there. Now, the thing that was strange about that was the night before I had an amazing dream. And the weird thing is I actually dreamt that I was actually in the house before I actually ever even saw the house.
Wow.
It was a room which we called the ladies' parlor. And in my dream, it was almost as though I'm floating around. It was almost like I'm going around and around. And as I go inside this one room, there's a group of people, there's music going on, like classical music, and there was a gentleman. I remember this clearly. His legs were folded. He was dressed in black. He had like a long coat, and he had a top hat on, and he had like one of those thick mustaches, and he had a big smile, and he had a drink in his hand. And, they're laughing and joking, and they're having a great time. And then it was shocking to me that when we first looked at the house, when I walked into the room, it was almost kind of like a deja vu type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't understand it. Like, how could it possible that I could dream about something I had not seen before?
Right.
And I just one of those things that you just it sticks in your head, and you just try not to dwell on it or think about it, and then find out later that perhaps maybe it had something to do. Maybe I was linked to the house. I have no idea. All I knew, I was shocked because while we're taking photos up on what we call a cistern, which would fill up with rainwater, my brother-in-law started snapping photos, and sure enough, he came across one particular photo, and it had a name on it. And as we did a close-up, clear as day, you can see Edwin on it. It says Edwin on it, which we were like, what does that mean? Like, and then I looked around to see if I could see Lillian, because if it said Lillian, I said, I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think we should get this house if it had both our names. So it was one of those things that. But the house is amazing as far as the fascination. Every so often we'll be outside and people just start knocking on the door. Can we come in? I'm like, I'm sorry, it's a private residence. No. Can we come in for? Some people would demand a tour. Like, you don't understand. I have to come in there. And I'm like, no, you don't. You don't understand. You can't come in. So it's just things like that. And I guess everybody in the neighborhood knew of it being the haunted house of the city. And I had no clue. I did hear the rumors before we signed it, but again, what are you to believe when you don't experience anything and you think that most of it is nonsense? Because that's exactly what I asked Lillian. Like, I told her, I said, what do you think? They're saying the house is haunted. She goes, you don't believe in that. And I'll leave it at blank. You don't believe in that blank, do you?
Your story is similar to others that I've heard. I know Bob Kremer in his book, Demon in Brownsville Road, he had similar experiences in his home where they believed that the house called them out, or the house wanted them to be part of their lives.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. Like, now as I look back on it, I think we were meant to have this house. And I really think that all the people that are involved with the house, Joni, Bill, Mimi, Marion, everyone who's associated with the house, there's a reason for it. I really do. I think that this group that we have together, and, basically Lillian has a passion for this house. I mean, even to this day, she wants so desperately to move back into it. And the main reason why we're not into it is because we had something that happened to her that is really difficult to talk about, because I just think the world and all I want her is to be fine and be safe. And when the person that you love more than anything in the whole world is being held on a bed, down. I mean, that's something that you just can't tolerate. I mean, everything that I've told you, it's been one of those things that you try to tolerate it as best you can, and after a while you kind of get used to it. But when it starts physically attacking, and not only that, but while Lillian was going through that, I was going through my own thing that was really difficult for me because I kept seeing a vision of a woman. In the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, it started with a voice, and sure enough, as I woke up, I can see a woman looking out the window. Never saw her face, but I can see her hair. It's waving out in the wind, and she's levitating. She's dressed in a white gown, and this impacted me so strongly that I could even emotionally feel what she's trying to tell me, and it was so overwhelming because the only thing I could relate to that is when my father passed on, that overwhelming feeling of grief that you feel for so long until you get used, after a while it heals. But I was feeling that. It was so, I felt such an impact with that, like when I was going through that. And it would happen 3 mornings in a row. I kept seeing the same vision, and I didn't understand it. I know that she felt intense pain, and I woke up with tears in my eyes. And I didn't understand it. Even to this day, I obviously they're trying to tell me something, and what is it they're trying to tell me? I don't know. And then Lillian was going through her thing, where it was more physically going into it. With me, I was feeling it, which in itself is so different from one another. So living in a haunted house, depending on the person, I guess it affects you differently. And I guess for me, I was feeling it and I was seeing it. For Lillian, it was using her as almost like a device to try to get her to do something.
Right.
And you would think that after all this that we went through, for her to be so passionate about wanting to keep the house and wanting to live in the house, and I wasn't going to have it. And that's why we're kind of we're torn between the whole thing. And I don't know what it will become. All I know is that we definitely have to do something with it as far as to try to save it. And otherwise, a part of history is gone. And it's in a fascinating house, not so much because of the things that go on in it, but it's the house itself, the architectural design, the history. It has 3 things going for it that, and it is an amazing house. Like besides all that I've told you, for the most part, 90% of the time, it's actually a beautiful place. Like you can enjoy it's beautiful, as you can tell everyone else. I mean, we always talk about that when we're in the kitchen, that the table that stands time, where we sit there and we just talk and we laugh and we joke. And sometimes there's things going on, but sometimes, for the most part, there is something fascinating and magical, I guess is the word, about the house. So
yeah, that's what Bill says too. He's been telling me in chat that the home is a very magical place. It's a lot happens there. A lot of positive things happen.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But for the most part, we weren't sure what we wanted to do. I didn't know how to handle the whole thing where one of us does not want it, the other one does want to keep it, and it was just one of those. We were in clash, like we didn't know what to do. So now, we just know that if we could just gather our resources and have such a great team that's backing us, we can try to see what we can do to help save it. I mean, it's just a piece of history for the city of Gardner. And, and I do get people from all over the world that want to come down and wanted to see the home and experience a little bit of anything, either whether it's the history, the paranormal, or as far as the architectural design as well. So those are the things, and I did find out through some research Joni did and things like that. There was a gentleman who died in a fire there, that which is a mystery in itself, and others who also died. But it's an amazing place, and others who have, for example, the gentleman from Ghost Adventures did a fabulous job. I was actually able to investigate with them, which I didn't think that they were going to do that. Like I remember being across the street and they called me over, Zach, and Zach asked me we would like for you to participate, because they thought that by me bringing me in, that it would bring some activity. And,
right.
And sure enough, I remember going down to the basement, and the first thing that we got was "He's here." Now, when I hear "He's here," I'm not sure if they were referring to me or a spirit that was there. It wasn't until we went up to the third floor, which to me was the most fascinating. Like I was actually in shock about what was going on when Zach had asked me, like, what are, if there's anything here that you would like to ask the spirits, what would you like to ask? And, from all the stories I'm telling you, my mind was going crazy. Like, are you trying to harm me? Do you like Lillian? Do you want us to leave? Do you want us to sell? You have so many questions running through your head. And the one that came to mind was, who's the woman of the house? And the minute I said that, they had this ghost box that was running. And in a fraction of a second, it said Lillian. And I was like in shock. Like, I couldn't believe. And then I said, I remember I was so overwhelmed. I remember swearing. Like, I was like, oh, snap. And I remember 2 seconds later, you can clearly hear a little girl say, hi. And it was just one thing after another. And the third floor was quite fascinating. I know a lot of people don't have a difficult time either in the third floor or the basement. Mm-hmm. And makes sense because the servants, there were so many, he had 23 servants back in the day. And obviously, all that amount of people in one little area in the servants' quarters, that might bring, you would think it would be more active than other places. The basement, obviously, it's definitely the creepiest place. It would probably be the basement. And again, we've encountered things in the basement. Lillian's encountered, but she still loves being in the basement, mm-hmm. which is crazy in itself. But it is a great place, and I would love for people to experience it. Usually 99% of everybody goes through there loves the house and find it absolutely fascinating. So we'll see what happens, but only time can tell. But I definitely have to do my part. I felt that we all have to do our part to try to see if we can save this house before it's too late, mm-hmm. Before the elements get to it. But so I just wanted to say thank you to everyone and thank you for having me on. And I wanted to just chime in on some of the things because even to this day I still would like answers, mm-hmm. and I think that's our goal, is to figure out what's going on, and hopefully someday someone can come in there and address some of the things and make it, if we do decide ever to make it our home. Mm-hmm. But the way it stands right now, I don't think it's such a great idea. And others have told me that it's not such a great idea, but you know how that goes. I guess if you go do a cleansing or something like that, maybe that can help. But
Edwin, have you heard about David Roundtree? He heads up a group that's very scientific, and he uses scientific equipment. And I believe and I feel that he and his team could answer some of those questions for you.
Is he local?
He's up in, where is he at? He's up in New Jersey.
Like Maryland.
He's in New Jersey.
Or somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, Hackettstown.
Yeah. They've had, discounting David because he's amazing, and he's given me advice as well over time. But they've had a number of really very powerful people, very powerful psychic mediums, very talented investigators, and who have looked it over. And people get different answers. It depends. They get different reactions. A lot of them get the same stories, but what I keep hearing over and over again is that the house is so incredibly haunted, and it has open portals right now that it would be almost impossible to completely cleanse it.
Right.
But it's too much. There's too many spirits. I truly feel, and they're saying that, obviously there's a portal there, so that obviously they can travel back and forth and things like that. So, I think it'd be very difficult to have it completely cleansed. I just don't see that happening. Some of those spirits have been there for 100 and something years. So, the only thing I wanted, I'm sorry because I have to get ready to head on out. I have to do an overnight shift. So, but I really truly appreciate it having me on, and I could ramble on forever because that's just the beginning of some of the things we encounter. I could be here for another 2 hours and still be talking.
Well, I would love to have you back on the show and have Joni and the rest of the gang on as well. I think we're just hitting the surface with what's really going on in the home.
I think some of the things I always think about is that I wish that there was some type of a college that studies, like a group of students that can study and spend time there and figure out if they can come with, evidence that they can capture that scientifically proves that all this stuff that happens. I mean, the first time that we had a group in there, they're strictly scientific, and they caught so many things. They caught a woman moaning in a sexual way in the red, what we call the red room. Wow. Which was quite amazing. That was also captured. There was also a light. There was also footsteps of like someone with sandals in the basement coming toward them, and completely freaked out one of the investigators. And of course EVPs. So there was quite a lot. And I remember, which is really weird. Real quick, I have to tell you this. Is that when we first had that group there that captured a lot of different, and they were only there for just a short period of time, like 2 hours, and they captured so much. I remember we had shut off the doors and we stayed in the kitchen. Meanwhile, we stayed in the kitchen, I would say an hour, just me and Lillian. Well, all of a sudden you can hear the sounds of cups being thrown right in the butler's pantry. And we're like, you've got to be kidding. The whole entire house they can investigate, and there's things happening right where we're at. So, and sure enough, Lillian was like, let me go check to see if it was an investigator. Maybe he dropped something, and we opened up the door. There's not a soul to be there. And again, it was the same sound that we hear over and over again. And sometimes these things come in bunches. And so, and again, it's quite fascinating, and it is a remarkable place as far as that paranormal as well. But I guess it really depends on the person, on whether or not you can tolerate it or you can't. 'Cause it will take a toll on you if you don't handle it well, and that's what happened with us.
All right.
But yeah, so I mean, but I just wanted to thank everyone that was on. We have a great group of friends that are, but I just want to thank everyone and thank you so much for having me on. And I would be glad to come back on. I better head on now before I get late, and then I'll be really in trouble.
All right, my friend Ed.
Well, thanks for calling in, Edwin. I really appreciate it. It was such a pleasure.
Oh, you know how it is, Joni. The minute I start talking about these things, I'm so passionate with some of these things that go on that I want,
It's great to have you on to tell the story. I've been, telling the story myself, but coming from you is so much more impactful. So I really...
Yeah, well, you can tell. Sometimes I get very emotional. I think that's why a lot of people, when I do a tour at the house, they really enjoy it, because they can sense they can sense my feelings and some of the things that I'm very passionate about as far as some of the things that go on. So, but thank you guys. I want you guys to enjoy your evening, and thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for calling
in.
Thank
you. Thank you. Take care, Joni. We'll see each other soon.
Okay. Very good.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Wow, that
was quite a treat, huh?
It was. I gotta tell you, Joni. I know there was some issues with the mic and the scheduling and all that, but I gotta tell you, this has been the best show I have done yet to date, other than Bob Kramer and his story. This is awesome. This has been the best show.
Oh wow! You just gave me goosebumps from head to toe. Thank you.
I loved the last 2 hours. It was awesome.
It's such an amazing house and such an amazing story, and it's ongoing. I didn't know when to stop writing, because the stories are still happening. Like him telling the story about the little boy the other day. This was Monday. We met at the house, and we're all sitting outside, and we saw this little boy waving at the house, and I waved back at him. I thought he was waving at us. I was like, when we started talking, we were like looking at him. I'm like, no, he's looking up at the third floor. What's he waving at? So these things are still ongoing, and it's just such a fascinating house and such a intriguing mystery.
And I can agree with Edwin. I don't think that the house could ever be cleansed with the elements involved, with the water, with the stone. I mean, it's just so much energy there.
Yeah, and the portals, and then you have some very, most hauntings aren't as advanced as this one is. If you've got a ghost in that house, it can slam doors and materialize in front of you. And, reading the book, there's chapters from people that have investigated there and their experiences. And, it's not just what happened to them, it's what everybody else encountered, too. It's just so crazy that, they're dug in deep, and there's just not really any way to to fix it. I mean, people have tried to go in and try to help, remove some of them, to let them cross over, just like kind of rescuing them, and they don't want to go. They're
Right.
there. I mean, they're dug in deep, and they don't want to leave. That's their house. They want us to leave,
Mm-hmm.
So,
Exactly.
crazy.
How can someone get a hold of your book, Joni? I know it's
Okay.
really awesome.
Yeah, it's on Amazon.com, and all they have to do is search for my name or type in Bones in the Basement, and it'll come up. I do have them, if somebody's local, I do have them at a couple of local shops in Gardner. They're at Terrapin Traders in Gardner, and then Gale Gates in Athol. I think I totally butchered the name of that. But, and then, people that are friends with me on Facebook know that they can message me and, either PayPal me money or send me a check, and I'll send them an autographed book. So there's a lot of ways to get it. I do have a website. If somebody wants to see what I'm working on next, I do have another book coming out in a matter of probably a week or two.
Mm-hmm.
So it's Joni.Mayhan.com. It's my website.
Okay.
Oh, I'm also on Barnes & Noble. Sorry, all my books are pretty much online.
Okay. So if I would order a book and have it autographed, what would I have to go? How would I go? How would I go about getting that?
Well, you'd either go through my website. You have to contact me there, and it emails me and say I'd love to have a signed copy of your book, and we would just make arrangements. I'd give you my address, and you would send me a check, or if we're Facebook friends, which I have a lot of Facebook friends, and if they're fans of the book or fans of the Victorian, I accept most requests. I'm up to like 2,500 friends at this point, so.
Wow.
They could message me on there, and we would work something out. If they're local, I've been meeting people at the house a lot just to, sign a book for them, and people love that they get to, meet me at the house and have their book signed right there, at the kitchen table. So, that's another option. So people just need to contact me. We don't do public tours anymore, but, if it's, Edwin's there or something, we can let one person in. So.
And your website is JoniMayhan.com?
It is.
Okay. I'm going to type that in chat. Awesome. I mean, it was, like I said, it's been an awesome time. And unfortunately, I'm not sure if War and Exchange is going to be on at 9 o'clock or not. But I want to thank him for giving me this chance to be on an extra hour. It was awesome. I think it was what.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and what a treat having. This is the first time I've done a lot of radio shows. The first time I've had Edwin call in. So, I've always told him about him, but he's always working overnight, so he hadn't been able to call in. So that was a real treat for me.
Mm-hmm, exactly. It was great talking to him. It was great to talk to you. It was great to talk to Bill and everybody.
Yeah.
An awesome time. We'll have to have the gang back on. It's sometime.
Yeah, the story will continue. I guarantee it. It's still continuing.
Is there going to be a part 2 of the book?
There may be. You never know. I mean, as the story evolves, there's more things that are happening. So, very possibly.
Awesome. That'd be great. Maybe like I said, we could have you back on and talk about part 2.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, Joni, it's been a pleasure talking to you and to all your friends. I think you really have something there with all the energy and everybody's combined passion to save the home, even the former owners as well. So that's pretty incredible, I think.
Yeah, we're not gonna stop till we get there. So.
Exactly. I don't blame you there. It sounds like an awesome place for sure. It's well
it really
deserved.
is. If you're ever in this neck of the woods, let me know and I'll give you a tour.
Awesome. I'd love to. I'd love to come on and experience some of that.
Oh yeah. Yep.
All right, Joni. Like I said, it's been a pleasure. I'm gonna have to sadly end the show here and.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me and. Hopefully we'll talk again soon.
All right, you bet. All
okay,
right.
Thanks.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You have been listening to this Supernatural Realm radio show. for this 2-hour special of Bones in a Basement with my guest Joni and former owner Ed and Bill Wallace and me and the whole gang. It's been an awesome time talking to you all. Like I said earlier, this has been one of, if not the best, next to Bob Kramer's interview that I did with him. They both have been gone down as the two best shows yet to date. So I'm very happy to be able to say that. I'm very happy that we had the participation we did in chat. Thank you, Joni. Thank you, Warren. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, my mother, Regine, who's also in chat, for chiming in there as well. It's been a great 2 hours. Next week I have psychic medium T. Smith. Who's going to be joining me on a show. We're going to talk about her experiences and what she has gone through as well. So it's going to be a great time. And then the 19th I have Nancy Clark, and the 26th Stephanie Bingham. She's also a psychic medium. She's been on School Spirits and some other TV shows as well. She's done a lot of events, paranormal events in the last few years. So I'm looking forward to talking to her as well. So I'm going to go ahead and end the show here and say goodnight. And I hope everybody tunes in next week and joins us in chat and calls in, and we have a great show like we did tonight. Thank you very much, and talk to you all next week. Good night, everybody.